Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is a story about what if Deku become Decipher Hero Part 1. If you guys enjoy this what if and want to see Part 2, comment down below and let me know before I start. Please do support for more awesome content and leave a like, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel and also share this video with your friends and check out the description in my playlist. The author of the story emaliros from Wattpad. So let's start the video. Prologue. In a world where 80% of the population has superpowers called quirks, heroes and villains came to light. Midoriya Izuku had his mind set on being a hero, but, congratulations, Izuku has 2 quirks. The doctor said enthusiastically. 𝗵𝗃 smiled and looked at her practically radiating son. Hear that, sweetie? You can become a hero just like All Might. 𝗵𝗃 encouraged, smiling brightly at her son. Yeah. Izuku chirped, happily running around with his All Might figure in hand. Now 𝗂𝗂 and I can become symbols of peace. 𝗵𝗃 turned back to the doctor. What are his quirks? She asked politely. He has telekinesis and pyrokinesis. Telekinesis lets him move objects with his mind. Though, if the objects are too heavy, he'll have headaches and migraines that might result in him passing out or worse. Pyrokinesis lets him emit flames from any part of his body. The higher the temperature he uses, the more his body reacts to it. You and your son are very lucky, Mrs. Midoriya, the doctor explained. 𝗵𝗃 nodded enthusiastically. They soon left the hospital, happily walking home together hand in hand while talking and giggling. Things were amazing. So why? Years time skip. Why did this have to happen to me? There's a woman in there. Izuku dropped down to his knees, dropping his bright yellow bag in the process. He watched as what was once his house burned down and crumble before him. His mother was still in there. How did this happen? 𝗵𝗃 was late to pick Izuku up from school. It was unlike her, so Izuku sneaked out and walked home by himself. He did not expect to see his house burning to the ground, along with his mother. Heroes were trying their best to defuse the situation, but none of them were succeeding. None of them could save his mother. They were supposed to be trained to handle these situations, so why? Izuku choked out as tears fell from his eyes. Overwhelmed by sadness, he ran away. He didn't know where he was going, but he was running away. Oof! Izuku yelped as he bumped onto a tall figure. He fell on his butt and rubbed his head as tears continued to fall endlessly. Oh dear, are you all right? A feminine voice asked. Izuku looked up and saw a woman with scarlet red hair and greenish golden eyes that were sheltered by rounded glasses. The crying brunette stood up and rubbed his eyes in an attempt to get rid of his tears. Why are you crying, dear? Was the only thing Izuku could choke out between sobs. Are you lost? The woman asked worriedly, patting Izuku's soft green hair. 𝗳𝗏𝗧𝗟𝗘 heroes tried to save her, but it was too late. Izuku stammered as more tears trickled down his cheeks. The woman looked shocked, then her look softened as she pulled Izuku into a hug. I am sorry you had to see that, little one. Do you want me to take you to the police station? She asked. Izuku hesitantly shook his head. Scary. Izuku mumbled. The last time he had been taken to the police station, his father was arrested and imprisoned for illegal selling of drugs and murder. It was devastating for the little child to see a parent leave and never come back. The red-haired woman sighed and ran a hand through her hair. Izuku, as if could sense her distress, embraced her in a tight hug. I'm sorry, Izuku mumbled, wiping away his tears. The woman smiled. My name is 𝗓𝗃𝗵𝗃. What's your name? Midoriya Izuku, Izuku replied. 𝗵𝗃 rubbed Izuku's soft cheeks. How old are you, Midoriya? 𝗵𝗃 looked surprised, then sighed. Do you want to live with me? I know we just met, but if you don't want to go to the police station? She was interrupted by Izuku hugging her and nodding profusely. She smiled and hugged back. Since then, 𝗵𝗃 became the legal guardian of Izuku. She raised Izuku as if he were her own son, which she didn't have at the moment. Izuku was given a choice to change his last name, but decided to keep Midoriya in memory of his loving biological mother. Izuku gained the ideology that heroes weren't enough and began a yakuza at the young age of 12 to help the heroes whenever they needed it, also to prove a point. At first, 𝗵𝗃 didn't approve of the yakuza. However, she eventually gave in and joined. Many villains and heroes alike agreed with the ideology and joined the yakuza. It wasn't long before the yakuza, known as unknown passcodes, quickly rose in power and popularity. Izuku is now well known in the underworld as Decipher. As years passed by, they were feared by most and wanted by both the heroes and villains. Each member of the yakuza has pledged everlasting loyalty to Izuku, despite majority not knowing his true identity. I'll be honest with you, this story is somewhat inspired by 𝗳𝗃𝗃 by 𝗵𝗃𝗃 because the series is golden. 6 years' time skip maniacal laughter echoed through the hallways of the unknown Passcodes yakuza base. The base is located under a normal-looking house, as to not cause suspicions. The laugh belongs to none other than the boss of the yakuza, Midoriya Izuku. "I'm being serious, Decipher," a raspy voice stated. Izuku, unlike most days, was wearing his villain costume. His villain costume consisted of a BLD red dress shirt, a black vest with 2 gray buttons, a neatly tied black tie tucked in between the vest and shirt, black dress breathes and well-polished black boots. To obscure his identity, he wears a shiny black masquerade mask with red highlights that has holes for his crimson-red eyes that glow menacingly. Additionally, his usually messy and unruly green hair was dyed black and he has plain circular black earrings. Izuku glanced at the man in front of him, his laughter dying down as he wiped away non-existent tears. Shigaraki Tamura, a male with blue hair that reached below his shoulders and piercing BLD red eyes. His attire was a simple black long-sleeve t-shirt, black long breathes and red shoes similar to Izuku's favorite pair. Honestly, the outfit might as well be called pajamas. And strangely enough, he has hands covering certain parts of his body to attempt to look menacing. My apologies, that was quite immature of me. However, I am curious, Shigaraki Tamura. What do you have to offer for me to accept your request? Izuku picked up a glass of wine and took a sip, savoring the flavor. Shigaraki took a few seconds to contemplate the words. "Power," was all he responded with. Izuku raised a brow. "Power?" Izuku repeated with a confused tone. Amused, Shigaraki laughed and nodded. "If you infiltrate UA and give the League of Villains information, we'll give you 1 quirk of your choosing," Shigaraki said, displaying a 1 on his finger. Izuku was beyond shocked. The yakuza boss sat back on his seat and contemplated the words. Could it be? Izuku shook his head at the thought. There was no way, he is deceased. All Might defeated him and made sure to kill him. Can my body even handle an additional quirk? If it can, it would prove to be useful if my fire and telekinesis ever failed me. Izuku nodded, redirecting his attention back to Shigaraki. All right, I will take you up on that offer. Shigaraki grinned ear to ear, pleased with Izuku's answer. After Shigaraki left the yakuza base, Izuku contemplated further into the request. It would be foolish to use both of my quirks for the infiltration, so I'll just use one. Pyrokinesis, perhaps. Izuku took off his mask, revealing 4 diamond-shaped freckles on both of his soft cheeks. He took out a packet of cigarettes from his pocket and stared at it. For a while. 𝗳𝗃𝗃. Izuku shouted, getting up from the couch he was sitting on and leaving the room. Oh boss, you're already done with that discussion. 𝗳𝗃𝗃, one of the most trusted few in the yakuza that knows of Izuku's true identity. He is a 37-year-old man with slick-back auburn hair and shiny golden eyes. His quirk is called fatigue loss. He can get rid of fatigue. However, he can only use his quirk on other people and it will drain his energy at a rapid pace. Indeed I am, Izuku responded, smiling innocently as he waved the packet of cigarettes in front of his friend and follower. Care to accompany me? 𝗳𝗃𝗃 grinned, making his way to the elevator. The usual spot. Izuku nodded and made his way to the elevator beside the brunette. 𝗳𝗃𝗃-san, I was wondering if you could train me supplementally starting from today. Since 𝗳𝗃𝗃 has the power to restore energy, he is Izuku's main trainer. Of course, boss. 𝗳𝗃𝗃 asked curiously. Shigaraki Tamura wishes for me to get inside information for his League of Villains. 𝗳𝗃𝗃 cringed at the name, causing Izuku to giggle a little. That's rough, buddy, 𝗳𝗃𝗃 joked, laughing after. Izuku didn't get it, so he ignored the comment. Time flew by like a breeze, quick and subtle. Before he knew it, 10 months had passed and so did Izuku's 15th birthday. Now, Izuku was already making his way to UA to partake in the entrance exams. He wasn't nervous in the slightest, he knew he was going to pass even with half of his power. The yakuza boss was wearing casual clothes, a skin-tight long-sleeved black shirt, overlapped by a short-sleeved loose gray shirt, black jogging briefs and comfortable Nike Air Force sneakers. Mies had bought a pastel green sling bag for him on his birthday, so he brought it along to store his additional items. While he was walking, he whistled a song with his eyes closed. Suddenly, he tripped on his own foot. Before he could use telekinesis on himself, he felt a light tap on his head and started levitating. It felt like all the weight on his shoulders were lifted. Literally. Sorry for using my quirk on you. It'll be bad luck to fall before an exam, don't you think? A cheery feminine voice claimed. She has shoulder-length brown hair and big round brown eyes. She sports 2 long locks of hair beside her face and a short bob at the back. She was wearing a brown oversized coat, a pastel pink scarf wrapped around her neck, a short shirt, gray thigh-length socks and dark gray school shoes. Izuku could only nod, mesmerized by the brunette's quirk. I'm going to deactivate my quirk. Get ready. Izuku nodded and positioned himself to land perfectly. Since he knew how to fly with telekinesis, he knew exactly how to manipulate the air. The slightly surprised brunette pressed her fingers together and mumbled a soft, "Release." When Izuku got released from her quirk, he landed on his feet and smiled sweetly at her. "Thank you for saving me," he thanked, bowing slightly. The brunette nervously chuckled. "That's what heroes do, isn't it?" Izuku nodded solemnly, looking a tad sad. He suddenly shook his head and stuck out his hand. "My name is Midoriya Izuku. Pleased to meet your acquaintance," Izuku greeted, grinning brightly. "𝗲𝗏𝗃𝗃 𝗧𝗏𝗃𝗃, the brunette said, her cheeks slightly red. She took the hand and lightly shook it. "Well, let us go in now. Don't want to be late before school even starts, right?" Izuku said, walking off. 𝗬𝗏𝗃𝗃 stared after the brunette, feeling her chest. There are 2 parts to the entrance exam in UA. First, the written. Of course, there isn't much to say here. Izuku is a natural genius. He doesn't need to study to ace such an easy exam. The brunette is sure he answered every question correctly, as well as finished the earliest. When the examiner was collecting the papers, Izuku was spinning a pencil around like it was his precious scythe. Oh, did I not mention he prefers to use a scythe as his main weapon? I thought you could tell by the book cover, my bad. I changed the book cover, so if you're confused, I completely understand. Don't worry, he still uses a scythe. Now, Izuku was waiting for the second part of the exam to start, the practical. He was still twirling his pencil around. It was either that or muttering. He didn't expect to see a familiar face. Izuku. Izuku snapped his head to his right, where he saw his one and only childhood best friend and crush, Bakugo Katsuki. The male has spiky blonde hair that is soft to the touch and appealing ruby red eyes. His quirk is explosion. He can create explosions on his palms due to having nitroglycerin-like sweat. It also makes him smell. Due to Izuku losing his focus completely, the pencil he was twirling dropped onto the ground and broke. Tears welled up in Katsuki's eyes as he stared at his long-lost childhood friend. Without a moment to spare, the blonde embraced his best friend like his life depended on it. "What the duck, Izuku? Where did you run off to for 6 ducking years?" Katsuki yelled, gaining the attention of some people around the two. "Kaken." Izuku mumbled, tears threatening to fall from his wide eyes. When Izuku decided to run away, he never once thought about how his disappearance would affect Katsuki. Now that he saw the blonde again, Izuku couldn't help but slightly regret his decision. "I'm sorry, Mai." Before Katsuki could finish his statement, President Mike walked onto the stage and told all the examinees to settle down. The Chihuahua had a mental argument with himself, but decided to let the brunette off the hook temporarily. As President Mike was explaining the first 3 robots to the audience, Izuku muttered a plan to himself. Since his pencil was a complete goner, he had to stick with his unnerving muttering. Suddenly, a blue-haired male stood up and pointed out that there were supposed to be 4 robots. Then, out of nowhere, he redirected his pointer finger to Izuku. "And you, the one with the unruly green hair. You have been mumbling ever since 𝗵𝘃𝗵𝗃 started his presentation. If you are unable to take this exam seriously, then leave." Izuku snapped back to reality and glared at the blue-haired male. His gaze softens when he recognizes the male. Izuku silently cursed his habits as he swiftly came up with an excuse. "I'm sorry. It's a habit," Izuku stammered, pretending to sound nervous while fidgeting with his fingers. He recognizes the blue-haired teen as 𝗳𝗍𝗃. He is the younger brother of 𝗳𝗍𝗃 or 𝗵𝗃. In case you haven't already noticed, Izuku is also one hell of an info broker, thus why the LOV chose him to gather information for them. Also, 𝗵𝘃𝗵𝗃 was going to explain the 4th robot last since it is an insignificant obstacle. A look of realization dawned on Ida's face as he apologized to 𝗵𝘃𝗃, sitting back down on his seat quietly as some people in the audience snickered at him. Izuku couldn't help but feel bad for the teen. "It's all right, examinee number 420. 𝗵𝘃𝗃 said, continuing his explanation. After 𝗵𝘃𝗃 was done with his presentation, all the examinees boarded separate buses to the location where they will partake in the entrance exam. Slightly to Izuku's relief, he was separated from Katsuki. Don't get him wrong, he misses the loud blonde, he just doesn't feel like answering his questions at the moment. In the middle of stretching, Izuku spotted Uraraka in the corner of his eye. She looked nervous, sweating even though the exam was yet to start. He sighed and was about to calm her down. "What are you doing?" Izuku stopped dead in his tracks. In front of him stood 𝗳𝗍𝗃. "Are you planning to distract her?" Izuku's left eye twitched noticeably. "And no, I'm sorry, I wanted to calm her down." He apologized sincerely. Just when Ida was about to respond, 𝗵𝘃𝗃 intercepted. "Go!" shouted the loud blonde hero as the gate opened. Without hesitation, Izuku dashed inside. The examinees who noticed his actions stood there bewilderedly. "What are you doing?" He has the right idea. There are no countdowns in real battles. Just like that, every examinee dashed inside like a stampede. It had been a few minutes since the start of the exam. Izuku has been racking up points like crazy, burning robots like they were just piles of trash. He made sure to keep to the same low temperature as to not damage his body. He was barely breaking a sweat and had 69 points, which was enough to pass. Suddenly, the ground started shaking. Izuku heard high-pitched screams and feet tapping on the ground rapidly, while he turned around to see the source of the fear and panic. A gigantic, 0-pointer robot was slowly walking towards them, crushing every small building in its wake. Just as Izuku was about to join the running stampede, he heard a call for help. He paused and turned around. "It'll be bad luck to fall before an exam, don't you think?" "How ironic," Izuku chuckled. Before he could think properly, his body acted on its own and ran full speed towards the trapped brunette. Uraraka's ankle was stuck under a pile of rubble. He immediately burnt all the rubble off her ankle. "Are you all right?" he asked, kneeling to inspect Uraraka's ankle. "I can't walk, I'm sorry," Uraraka admitted solemnly. Izuku was about to say something, but the ground started shaking again, warning him that the 0-pointer was getting closer. "𝗧𝗵𝗃𝗧, I have to take it down." Izuku stood up to his full height and glared at the humongous robot before him. The greenette took a deep breath and held his hands out in front of the 0-pointer, before igniting his palms on fire. The swerving heat encircling the teen made him relieved he made all his clothes fireproof. Still, despite the intense heat, the 0-pointer was nearly unfazed. Irritated, Izuku increased his firepower. He could feel his skin burning but ignored it. Slowly, the blazing orange fire turned into a fierce blue. The blue flames engulfed the 0-pointer, leaving nothing but ashes and the smell of burnt steel. As the exam ended, Izuku collapsed and fell unconscious from quirk overuse. He was immediately brought to Recovery Girl's office. Meanwhile, in the observation room, "He's strong." A woman gasped. "𝗵𝗃𝗵𝗃. She is a tall woman with medium lengthy purplish blue hair that spikes at the end. Her eyes are a light blue and she also has a small mole under her eye. That said, her attire consists of a simple bodysuit that's white and accompanied by a black corset. The corset also makes up the collar of her bodysuit and it's bejeweled with red gems. She wears broken 𝗳𝗵𝗃𝗲𝗃 on her wrists. To complete the look, she wears long socks with boots and a red belt. She is well known as the pro hero, Midnight. Her quirk lets her put others to sleep using a particular gas. Nomiuri stared at the green-haired teen through the screen, wide-eyed. Indeed he is, 𝗍𝗍 responded. 𝗍𝗍, the principal of UA Academy, is a stout man who appears to be a possible combination of several different animals, including a dog, a mouse, and a bear, which would make him a chimera. The animal seems to be intrigued. He pushed past his limits just to save one girl. 𝗧𝗵𝗃𝗍𝗂 Yagi, an old-looking man with blonde hair and blue eyes, mumbled. The whites in his eyes were replaced by a sad black. His attire consists of a plain, oversized, short-sleeved white shirt, baggy green jeans, and brown shoes. He is known as the #1 pro hero, All Might. Yagi, are you planning on giving it to him? 𝗍𝗍 assumed. 𝗧𝗵𝗃𝗍 nodded determinedly. He's willing to sacrifice his life for another. To me, he's the perfect candidate. With that, 𝗧𝗵𝗃𝗍 walked off. His destination, Recovery Girl's office. Recovery Girl's office. Izuku's eyes fluttered open and saw an unfamiliar white ceiling. He sat up on the bed and inspected his surroundings. A hospital. Izuku tried to recall his last moments before he passed out. When he placed his hand on his forehead, he noticed the bandages wrapped around his hands. That's right, I protected 𝗬𝗧𝗏. What was I thinking? I'm not a hero. Midoriya, you're awake. An old and feminine voice said. Izuku directed his gaze to an old woman that had just walked in through the door. 𝗧𝗵𝗃𝗁𝗍. A short, elderly woman with gray hair styled into a netted bun, a large syringe poking diagonally out of it to the left. Additionally, she walks with a cane designed like a syringe that she can also use for healing the injured. Recovery Girl. Izuku mumbled, observing the old woman. She smiled and nodded. Though, her smile disappeared as soon as it appeared. What were you thinking? You're too reckless. Chiyo berated, smacking Izuku upside his head. You had second-degree burns all over your hands. It's the drawback of my quirk. Izuku complained, rubbing his head. 𝗬𝗧𝗏 would be much more injured than I was if I had just ignored her. Chiyo sighed. Yes, I suppose so. Though, I expect you to not get this injured from today onwards. Izuku only nodded and got up from the bed. Wait. Before you go, someone wants to talk to you. Izuku looked confused as Chiyo hurried to the door. She opened it and gestured for someone to come inside. 𝗧𝗵𝗃𝗍𝗏 walked in and smiled at Izuku. Isn't that All Might? Izuku's eyes widened as he tensed. What could All Might possibly want with me? Is something wrong, my boy? 𝗧𝗵𝗃𝗍𝗏 asked. Izuku hastily shook his head and stared at the man. Midoriya, meet 𝗧𝗵𝗃𝗍𝗏 Yagi. Chiyo introduced, gesturing to 𝗧𝗵𝗃𝗍𝗏. Izuku nodded, forcing a smile to grace his soft lips. And nice to meet you, Mr. Yagi. Izuku exclaimed with as much enthusiasm as he could muster as he bowed. Likewise, young Midoriya, 𝗧𝗵𝗃𝗍𝗏 bowed as well. Recovery Girl said you wanted to speak to me. Izuku questioned, genuinely confused as to what the #1 hero wanted with him. Yes. Please, sit down. I have a lot of explaining to do. Izuku nodded and sat back down on the bed, followed by 𝗧𝗵𝗃𝗍𝗏. Chiyo left the room to provide privacy for the two. The blonde hero explained his hero career, the injury that destroyed his lung and stomach, and one for all. Izuku already knew everything, but just nodded along while acting shocked to avoid looking suspicious. After a while, he knew what 𝗧𝗵𝗃𝗍𝗏 wanted him to do, but he would feel guilty if he took one for all. Despite Izuku being a yakuza boss, he has a heart unlike most. The one-sided conversation ended with 𝗧𝗵𝗃𝗍𝗏 requesting for Izuku to take his power. The greenette could only look down, not wanting to meet the pro hero's blue eyes. I appreciate the offer, Mr. Yagi, but I'm not aiming to become a hero. Izuku admitted, keeping his head low. The statement shocked the blonde. Give your quirk to someone who is aiming to become a hero. Make it count, please. As Izuku was about to leave the room, Toshinori grabbed his wrist. Why aren't you aiming to become a hero? Toshinori asked, surprising the greenette. Izuku shook his head. I'm not hero material. Sorry to disappoint. Izuku just wanted the man to let go of his wrist. He wanted to go back to his base and report to Shigaraki, but something is telling him to stay and take Toshinori's offer. Yes, you are. You saved Miss Uraraka. Your body just moved on its own, didn't it? Toshinori could tell by Izuku's shocked expression that he was right. You are hero material. You just didn't realize it. Izuku stayed silent, looking down as tears stung at his eyes. Then, with newfound determination, Izuku turned around and met Toshinori's bright blue eyes. Fine, why did I agree to that? The same thought has been swirling in Izuku's mind for around 2 hours as he paced his room. He was wearing a dark green oversized long-sleeved hoodie and comfortable skin-tight black briefs without shoes. Knocks were heard on Izuku's room door, directing the greenette's attention to it. Izuku, are you all right? I can hear your footsteps thumping loudly from downstairs. 𝗵𝗃𝗃, Izuku's legal guardian. She is 25 in age. Her quirk is called super hearing. It heightens her hearing by 30%. Though, because of that, her ears are extremely sensitive and her other senses are slightly lowered. Izuku opened the door gently. 𝗵𝗃𝗃. Nice to see you again. My apologies for the noise. I did not mean to make you worry. Izuku apologized, making sure to lower his voice. It's quite all right, Izuku. Do you want me to cook dinner tonight if you're busy? 𝗵𝗃𝗃 asked, taking out her phone to search through recipes. That would greatly be appreciated, Izuku said, smiling sweetly. Thank you. 𝗵𝗃𝗃 returned a smile and left the room, gently closing the door. Izuku sighed and sat on his bed, relaxing slightly. So, I have one for all now. Hopefully, I learn how to use it before I kill myself. With that last thought, Izuku unintentionally drifted off to sleep. 2 weeks later, Izuku was sparring with 𝗧𝗵𝗲 when the doorbell upstairs in the normal-looking house rang. Could someone be a dear and get that? Izuku requested, aiming a punch to 𝗧𝗵𝗲's gut. The older male was able to narrowly avoid it, but got punched in the face with Izuku's other hand after. On it, boss. Let's take a break today, 𝗧𝗵𝗲 requested between gasps for air as he dropped down to the floor on his backside. My apologies, I think I went overboard, Izuku said worriedly, helping the older male get on his feet. No. I just used my quirk to help a hero today, 𝗧𝗵𝗲 responded, waving a hand to Izuku to show he was fine. You shouldn't overwork yourself. You know how vital your quirk is, 𝗧𝗵𝗲, Izuku pleaded, crossing his arms with a pout. 𝗧𝗵𝗲 sighed. Even if you're the boss of an infamous yakuza, you're still a kid. Izuku ignored the comment and turned around with a huff. Boss. There's a letter for you. Tsunaka Reiko, a girl with long silver hair that reaches below her waist and chocolate brown eyes. She is 17 in age. She is quirkless, but Izuku doesn't mind. Izuku slightly perks up and glances at the envelope Reiko was holding. Thank you, Reiko, Izuku said, walking towards her and gently taking the envelope. He immediately recognized the stamp on the envelope. This is from you. I have earned my interest, 𝗵𝗃𝗃 said, tossing her scarlet hair back and standing behind Izuku as he sat on the couch. Reiko sat beside Izuku, staring intently at the envelope. 𝗧𝗵𝗲, intrigued, sat on the other side of Izuku. The green-haired yakuza boss opened the envelope and found a button. He raised a brow and placed it on the coffee table in front of the couch. Reiko, would you prefer to do the honors? Izuku asked, gesturing to the button. Reiko nodded and pressed the button with her index finger. A hologram suddenly popped up, startling the 4 criminals. They saw a silhouette of a bulky figure and was surprised as they recognized it. All Might. 𝗧𝗵𝗲 gasped, his golden eyes going wide. Indeed, I heard he is going to be teaching at UA, Izuku informed. 𝗵𝗃𝗃 hummed in acknowledgement. I am here as a hologram. Young Midoriya, congratulations. You passed the entrance exam with flying colors. The All Might hologram boomed, causing 𝗵𝗃𝗃 to cover her ears. Izuku looked at her worriedly. Go back to your room. I'll tell you the results later. 𝗵𝗃𝗃 nodded and ran off, leaving the three on the couch. You think she'll be okay? 𝗧𝗖𝗍 asked worriedly. Izuku nodded. She would not be in my yakuza if she cannot even handle that. The two members beside the 𝗓𝗏𝗏 nodded proudly. You answered every question correctly in the written exam and have a total of 129 points in the practical exam, which got you to first place. All Might boomed. 129. Izuku mumbled aloud, raising a brow. Was that not your score? Reiko asked from beside the 𝗓𝗏𝗏. The boy only shook his head in response. You might be wondering, 129 points. But I only had 69 points. Well, as a future hero, combat points are not all you need while fighting villains. That's why we have. The All Might hologram boomed. Rescue points. Both All Might and Izuku said simultaneously. Being a hero doesn't only mean to fight villains, you also have to save the citizens caught in the crossfire. All Might continued confidently. This is how heroes inspire others, why we're called heroes. See, young Midoriya. You're hero material after all. Izuku looked down, avoiding the bewildered gazes of his followers. I'd rather not talk about that, Izuku mumbled. The two criminals beside him only nodded and turned back to the hologram. Young Midoriya, welcome to your Hero Academy. All Might finished as the hologram cut off. The room filled with silence as no one knew what to say. Izuku sighed. Ignore what he said, I am not a hero. The members of his yakuza could only stare sadly at the green-haired teen as he walked away. A few days later Izuku was sitting on his bed, scrolling through his phone. Suddenly, knocks were heard on his door. You may enter, Izuku said, looking up from his phone. The door opened, revealing 𝗧𝗖𝗍. How may I aid you, 𝗧𝗖𝗍? We haven't hung out in a while. Want to have a smoke outside the house? 𝗧𝗖𝗍 asked, holding up a box of cigarettes. Izuku smirked, standing up. Let me get a change of clothing first, Izuku said, walking to his closet. 𝗧𝗖𝗍 nodded and left the room. Izuku sighed. Being a yakuza boss puts a lot of responsibility and power on your hands which, for a 12-year-old, was quite stressful. The person who introduced smoking was none other than 𝗧𝗖𝗍, who just wanted to help. Izuku has been smoking for 3 years, since he was 12, with no intention of stopping whatsoever. Izuku walked out of his room with a black elbow-length sleeved hoodie, black jogging briefs and his signature red sneakers. He went to one of the elevators and pressed the fast up button. Hey, Izuku, 𝗵𝗃𝗏 called, waving over to her superior. Izuku turned around and waved back. The red-haired female stood beside him. Where are you off to? Just outside the house to smoke with 𝗧𝗖𝗍, Izuku said, tucking his hands in his pockets. What about you? The elevator door opened, and the two walked inside. I'm going to the arcade with my husband, 𝗵𝗃𝗏 responded. Izuku nodded and looked away in jealousy. The red-haired woman's sweat dropped at her boss's reaction. Don't worry, Izuku. You're very likable, I'm sure you'll get your lover soon. Izuku pouted. I doubt Kaken would like me back after I abandoned him, 𝗵𝗃𝗏 chuckled. No one can stop loving you, Izuku. After all, 𝗵𝗃𝗏 ruffled the 𝗓𝗏𝗏's soft curls, making him whine in protest. You're adorable. I am also a criminal. Izuku huffed, slapping her hand away. 𝗵𝗃𝗏 looked at him sadly, but before she could say anything else, the elevator's doors opened. Good luck, boss, 𝗵𝗃𝗏 said before walking off. After Izuku stood there for a while, then he smiled and shook his head. Yo, boss, 𝗧𝗖𝗍 said as Izuku stood beside him. The older male passed the younger a cigarette box and gestured to his cigarette. Mind lighting it for me? Izuku chuckled. What happened to your precious lighter? The 𝗓𝗏𝗏 lit a flame on his index finger and lit the cigarette. Fell in a hole, 𝗧𝗖𝗍 sighed. Izuku raised a brow and lit his own cigarette. How did that happen? Izuku questioned, exhaling a puff of smoke. 𝗧𝗖𝗍 shrugged. Just happened. The two laughed at the answer. Never smoke or drink alcohol. It's not good for you. Especially if you're underage. I love baddie Deku, so I just decided to add small details in. Time passed and night came. Izuku was getting tired, so he called it a night and put out his cigarette. He waved goodbye to 𝗧𝗖𝗍 and headed back to his room with his hands in his pockets. I have school tomorrow, 𝗵𝗏𝗏. Izuku sighed, dropping down onto his bed. I wonder how the first day will go. Izuku got up from his bed and changed into his pajamas. He had multiple scars from battles he had to fight with rival mafias, but he was able to hide them with long sleeves and gloves. The 𝗲𝗄𝗃 silently growled. No doubt I will have to use the gloves when in school. Such a hassle. He quickly changed and went down to cook dinner. He has personal chefs, but rather cook by himself. Izuku whistled while walking to school. He never thought he'd see the day where he'd go back to school. His uniform was neatly worn, with his black sling bag and signature red Air Force sneakers. In addition, he had to wear his gloves to cover up the scars on his hands. If you do the cooking by the book, Izuku sang, then you'll have a break it down, bish. Let me see you back it up. A sudden voice chimed in. Izuku snapped his neck to the direction of the voice. 𝗧𝗃𝗃. Izuku unintentionally stammered, seeing the explosive blonde behind him. Hey Izuku, Katsuki growled, more irritated than usual. He walked beside the 𝗲𝗄𝗃. So are you going to answer my questions or not? Izuku gulped. What do you need to know? He nervously asked, gripping tighter onto his 𝗬𝗲𝗍. Where have you been these past 6 years? Katsuki yelled. I started living by myself, Izuku said, fidgeting with his fingers. What did you expect him to say? 𝗧𝗃𝗃. I started a yakuza named Unknown Passcodes, started smoking, drinking and committing felonies. Yeah, not going to happen. Do you know how much I missed you? Katsuki asked, stopping dead in his tracks, causing Izuku to stop as well. The blonde clenched his fists as tears stung at his eyes. I had no confirmation of where you were, or whether you were alive or not. Do you know how scared I was? Izuku felt guilt pang at his chest. He left his best friend behind without saying goodbye, without any reassurance of his safety, without even thinking twice. The 𝗲𝗄𝗃 wrapped his arms around Katsuki as tears trickled down his soft, freckled cheeks. I'm so sorry, Izuku mumbled, not letting go of his friend. Without hesitation, Katsuki embraced the green-haired teen. Please don't leave me again, Katsuki begged, silently sniffling as salty tears fell from his eyes. I promise, Izuku said sincerely. Katsuki chuckled between sobs. Together forever until the end, the two best friends walked to class side by side, chatting about what has happened in the 6 years they were apart. Of course, Izuku never once brought up the yakuza. Katsuki felt warm around Izuku, like the ice around his heart was being melted by the 𝗲𝗄𝗃's extremely warm personality. He didn't know how to describe the strange feeling. All he knew was he only felt it around the green-haired teen. When they reached the classroom, they saw a blue-haired teen that they both recognized. Greetings, new classmates. Ida chirped, walking towards the two. Izuku felt annoyed, but kept up his friendly demeanor. Hello. Izuku greeted. Katsuki only ignored him and continued walking to his seat. My name is Ida Tenya. I am from 𝗬𝗵𝗲 Academy. Katsuki paused in his step, turning back around. 𝗬𝗵𝗲. So you're an elite. I'll have fun kicking your butt. Bakugo said, grinning devilishly. Izuku deadpanned at the action, while Ida looked offended. That is not behavior befitting of a UA student. Ida berated. As the two started arguing, Izuku ignored them and walked to his seat. Sighing, he sat down on his desk and looked out the window. Hey, I'd know that fluffy hair from anywhere. A sudden cheery voice echoed in the room. Izuku barely managed to stifle a groan as he turned his head around. If I remember correctly, you're Midoriya, right? And you're Uraraka. Izuku nodded as Uraraka grinned. Looks like we both made it to the hero course. By the way, your quirk is amazing. Uraraka exclaimed, way too cheerfully. Thanks, yours is too. Izuku said with an equal amount of enthusiasm. Just as Uraraka was about to respond, another voice joined the Discord server. If you're here to make friends, you might as well leave now. A masculine, tired voice said. Everyone turned their attention to the doorway. Izuku recognizes the person standing there as Aizawa Shoyuda, or the underground pro hero, Eraserhead. 𝗧𝗏 is a slender and tall pale-skinned man with messy, shoulder-length black hair that partially hangs in front of his face and often half-opened black eyes. I am 𝗧𝗏, your homeroom teacher this year. The tired man pulls out multiple UA gym uniforms. Put these on and go to the PE grounds. Be late and you're expelled. Everyone remained still in shock as 𝗧𝗏 walked out. Does he mean that? Kirishima Ijura asked, worried about getting expelled. I'd rather not stick around to find out, Izuku said nervously, getting up from his seat and grabbing a gym uniform. Without saying anything else, he dashed out to the hallway. Izuku hastily changed to his gym uniform. He knew about 𝗧𝗏's frequent expulsions, and he doesn't plan on failing his missions so early into it. Whoa, Midoriya-kun. Where did you get those cool scars? Kaminari Denki asked, inspecting the green-haired teen. Izuku, feeling uncomfortable, quickly changed and left. Author-san is too lazy to describe everyone the best she can, so just Google their names if you forgot how they look. Izuku hurried outside and into the field, where he saw 𝗧𝗏 sleeping in his yellow sleeping bag. Out of curiosity, the greenette poked it. Mr. 𝗧𝗏, are you alive? Izuku mumbled, poking the sleeping bag. Yes, but I might as well not be. Stop that before I expel you. 𝗧𝗏 peered out from his sleeping bag, surprising Izuku. Hi, sensei. Izuku complied, standing up to his full height while smiling sweetly to his teacher. A few minutes passed, and the students of Class 1A slowly poured out from the changing rooms. By now, 𝗧𝗏 was out of his sleeping bag. That took you all too long. Work on your timing, heroes don't have time to spare, 𝗧𝗏 said, shooting a glare to his students that sent chills down their spines. 𝗧𝗏 picked up a ball and handed it to Izuku. Midoriya, how far was your softball throw in middle school? The greenette blinked in confusion at his teacher. I was homeschooled, sir, Izuku said, tilting his head to the side like a lost puppy. 𝗧𝗏 hummed. Stand at that circle and throw that ball with your quirk. 𝗧𝗏 pointed to the circle, then to the ball. Izuku nodded and stood inside the circle. Just don't step out of the circle. Izuku glanced at Bakugo, who barely noticed the look, then took a half step back and pulled back his arm. From what I discovered during my training is that I break my bones whenever I use one for all, which would be horrible if I were to fight a very durable enemy. However, I would release a lot to force. I came up with a conclusion that instead of breaking my arm right off the bat, I could focus the power on one specific part of my body to avoid powerlessness after one attack. He focused one for all on his index finger and threw the ball to the best of his ability. The force broke sound barriers and even slightly pushed back some of his classmates. 705, 3 meters. 𝗧𝗏 started nonchalantly, showing a device to the class. Some of the class gasped, shocked at the large number. Izuku found himself not caring for anyone else's opinion, except Katsuki's. He wanted to impress the blonde, he wanted the blonde to be proud of him, he wanted Bakugo Katsuki to compliment him, to show him affection. Stop, Izuku. Izuku's eyes widened as a red blush stained his cheeks. He covered them shyly as his stares at his explosive blonde. The pain in his finger completely disappeared the moment he saw the glint in Katsuki's ruby eyes. Now isn't the time to have a gay panic. I have a mission to accomplish. We're allowed to use our quirks. This is going to be so fun. Ashido Mina, a pink alien, exclaimed with excitement. 𝗧𝗏's left eye twitched. Fun. You think this is going to be fun? Mina gulped at his tone, her excitement dying down. Then, whoever gets last place will be deemed to have no potential and will be expelled immediately. The class gasped and some even stopped breathing for a moment. Why, you can't be serious. We worked so hard to get this far. This isn't fair. Uraraka complained, receiving a few nods from others. Izuku decided to step in. Sorry, Uraraka, but this is the cruel reality. Villains won't be fair to you, natural disasters won't be fair to you. It's just how it is, the greenette explained, rubbing the back of his neck. Midoriya is right. When you become heroes, you'll have to face the cruel reality that is the world. 𝗧𝗏 said. The atmosphere drops as students start contemplating on the words. Do your best in the tests, go beyond plus ultra. The quirk apprehension test, as Izuku calls it, went smoothly. Izuku was able to get top 5 in every test, except for repeated sidesteps, despite not being able to use much of his fire quirk or one for all. 𝗧𝗵𝗲 Todoroki Shudo RD, Bakugo Katsuki Midoriya Izuku, 𝗳𝗏𝗃𝗃, Tokoyami Fumikage Shoji Mizo Mashareo Ojiro Kirishima Ijiro, Ashido Mina Uraraka Ochako Kuji Kuda Rikadu Sada Tfu Azui Yuga Aoyama Hanta Siro Kaminari Denki Kyuka Hagakure Tsuruku. Minato Minoru Izuku smirked to himself, proud of his results. No! Minato wailed, crying his eyes out. Kaminari tried to comfort him, but the tears continued to pour with no intention of stopping anytime soon. Izuku, feeling slight sympathy for the small purple-haired boy, walked over to him. The greenette smiled and patted Minato's head gently. It's okay, Minato-kun. You'll do better next time. Minato stopped sobbing and looked up to meet Izuku's warm, emerald gaze. Without saying anything, Minato jumped onto Izuku and embraced him. The greenette awkwardly hugged back. You are such an angel, Midoriya. Minato cried. The comment caused Izuku to sweat drop. As the short teen continued crying on Izuku's shoulder, the green-haired teen patted his back gently. Aizawa sighed. No one is getting expelled. That was just a logical ruse to push you all to do your best. The statement caused an uproar as students started complaining. You guys didn't know. Oh, I guess I should have said something, Momo said. The class deadpanned at her statement. No, Aizawa is known to have expelled many more students than I have weapons. You're wrong. Izuku narrowed his eyes at the black-haired girl, while still patting Minato's back as he was now crying tears of joy and relief. Hear that, Minato? You're not getting expelled, Kaminari said from beside the two embracing teens. Izuku smiled sweetly at the blonde boy. After he went to Recovery Girl's office to heal his finger, Izuku was about to exit the giant gates of UA High School. Hey, Midoriya-kun. Izuku did a full 180 degrees to face the person who had called him. Oh, hello Ida. Izuku greeted, waving at the blue-haired teen as he walked beside him. I want to apologize for my behavior during the entrance exams, Ida said, bowing lowly. Izuku stepped back in surprise. I was behaving immaturely and called you out on something you couldn't control. I'm sorry. Izuku couldn't say anything, just stand there in shock. Realizing this, he snapped himself out of his stupor. No, it's fine. Why, you were just acting like a 𝗵𝗃 student. Izuku stammered, still in a daze. Ida stood up to his full height. Do you want to start over and become friends? The blue-haired teen stuck out his hand for the greenette to shake. Nervously, Izuku took the hand and shook it. I don't think I've introduced myself yet. My name is Midoriya Izuku. The green-haired teen chirped happily. Ida smiled and nodded. Both withdrew their hands and were about to walk away. Suddenly, another voice rang out from behind them. Midoriya. Ida. This time, both turned their heads and saw Uraraka. Hey Uraraka. Izuku greeted, waving at her. She waved back. Wanna walk home together? Uraraka asked, jumping with excitement. I don't mind. Midoriya. Ida said, gesturing to Izuku. Izuku merely shrugged in response and continued walking. Uraraka and Ida chuckled to each other and followed him. Meanwhile, Katsuki stood behind them, staring specifically at Izuku. He looked disappointed. Did he manifest another quirk? Why didn't he tell me? Does he even like me anymore? Multiple thoughts flooded Katsuki's mind. He felt sad that Izuku didn't tell him about having another quirk. He could only stand there as his best friend walks away with his replacements. The next day, the classes in UA are the same as any other school. The students study all the basic subjects such as English, mathematics, and science. Then, later in the day, students of the Hero course have an additional lesson. Hero Basic Training. I am. Everyone perks up at the familiar voice. The door of the classroom suddenly bursts open, and All Might enters the room in an odd manner. Coming through the door like a normal person. As students murmured about All Might to each other, Izuku spun his pencil with little interest. All Might slowly walked towards the podium in front of the classroom, standing behind the lectern. I teach hero basic training. It is a subject where you train in different ways to learn the basics of being a hero. You'll take the most units of this subject. Let's get right into it. This is what we'll do today dash. All Might does a weird pose, which made Izuku cringe slightly. Combat training. Combat. 𝗵𝗃𝗲 grinned excitedly. Training, Izuku mumbled boringly. All Might does another weird pose. And to go with that are these. Pointed to the walls. The light blue stripes on the walls, which the students thought were just for decoration, started moving out from their sockets. Costumes made based on your quirk registrations and requests you sent in before school started. The class roared in excitement. Costumes. Izuku mumbled aloud. He wasn't as excited as the others, but he was still excited. After you change, gather in ground beta. All Might finalized. Yes, sir. All Might stood idly while waiting for his students to arrive. Finally, after they all arrived, All Might's grin spread wider than ever. They say the clothes make the man, young men and ladies. Be fully aware. All Might said. From now on, you are heroes. That's great, everyone. You all look cool. All Might said, observing his students. Now, shall we begin, you zygotes? A few days ago, if I am going to be a hero, I will need a costume. Izuku mumbled, taking a sip from his cup of red wine. Well, if you need a costume, I have a few suggestions. Someone chimed in from behind Izuku. The greenette turned around and rolled his eyes. When did you become a clothing designer, 𝗵𝗃𝗧𝗏? Izuku joked. 𝗵𝗃𝗧𝗏 chuckled and sat next to him on the couch. May I have some wine? 𝗵𝗃𝗧𝗏 asked, pointing to the bottle in front of Izuku then to her cup. Izuku smiled and nodded, passing her the bottle. So do you have any ideas? Not quite. I was originally planning to ask 𝗧𝗖𝗍 for suggestions, but I changed my mind. Izuku said awkwardly, remembering how messy the brunette's room was. 𝗵𝗃𝗧𝗏 chuckled and nodded. Wise choice. Please do not start, you have been playing a variety of video games lately. Izuku noticed. If you weren't my boss I'd kill you, 𝗵𝗃𝗧𝗏 commented, glaring at Izuku. As if you could, Izuku mocked with a scowl, taking another sip from his cup. Anyway, I think you should stick to something fancy. Perhaps, suspenders. 𝗵𝗃𝗧𝗏 suggested, taking a sip of her wine. Izuku smirked. Agreed. I, for one, think I look quite nice in suspenders. Couldn't agree more. Maybe your blonde Pomeranian might recognize you more. Izuku's face flushed red. Be quiet. Izuku unintentionally stuttered. 𝗵𝗃𝗧𝗏 laughed as she left with her cup still in her hand. The greenette growled and started writing down ideas. That's how he came up to a conclusion. Izuku's hero costume is made up of a green buttoned-up dress shirt. The sleeves were rolled up, revealing the scars on his forearms. Black suspenders, hooked onto black dress breathes. Followed by well-polished black dress boots. The boots were modified to be shock-absorbent and it, as well as everything else he's wearing, is fireproof. Izuku decided to not put on a tie, since anyone could strangle him with it. The green-haired male walked out last, quickly noticing most of his classmates staring at him. Whoa, Midoriya-kun, you look so cool. 𝗬𝗏𝗏𝗃 complimented from beside him. He laughed and rubbed the back of his head. Thanks, 𝗬𝗏𝗏𝗃-chan. My friend suggested the outfit, Izuku said. I should have written what I wanted. Mine ended up being a skin-tight bodysuit. It's embarrassing. 𝗬𝗏𝗏𝗃 said, rubbing the back of her head. In my opinion, you look remarkable. Izuku complimented, smiling sweetly. 𝗬𝗏𝗏𝗃 chuckled slightly. Thanks. The hero course is the best, 𝗵𝗃𝗧𝗏 commented, putting up a thumbs up. I comforted you because I thought you would be a great hero. Who would have thought you would be a pervert? Izuku thought, sighing. Now, it's time for combat training. All Might boomed. He then started explaining the rules and procedure off a card, while answering every question the students had. Alright. The teams are Team A, Midoriya Izuku, 𝗬𝗏𝗏𝗃 Ochako Team B, 𝗵𝗃𝗲 Shoji, Todoroki Shudo Team C, 𝗵𝗃𝗏 Minoru, 𝗳𝗏𝗧𝗏 Momo Team D, 𝗳𝗏𝗃𝗧𝗏 Bakugo Katsuki Team E, Mina Ashido, Yuga Aoyama Team F, Koji Koda, Rikido Sato Team G, Denki Kaminari, Kyoka Jiro Team H, Tokoyami 𝗵𝗃𝗃𝗁𝗃, Tsu Azui Team I, Mashareo Ojiro, Toru Hagakure Team J, 𝗵𝗃𝗃𝗁𝗃, Kirishima Ijuku. It must be fate that we're partnered together. Uraraka chirped excitedly. Izuku only nodded in response as he spun a thin, black stick around. Taking notice of it, Uraraka spoke up. "What's that?" Izuku didn't even spare the brunette a glance as he answered. "It is a weapon. It is extremely dangerous in my hands, so I will only use it when necessary," he explained, impressively twirling the stick with his fingers as Uraraka stared at it in interest. "All right, let's see which Ri the first teams up." All Might shoved his arms inside 2 boxes, rummaged through them, and pulled out 2 ball, 1 black and 1 white. Team A, villains, and Team D, heroes. Teams, please make your way to the front of a building. Izuku sighed, then walked to a building, followed by Katsuki, Uraraka, and Ida. Uraraka and he were to enter the building first. After a few minutes, Katsuki and Ida would enter the building. Before Izuku and Uraraka entered the building, All Might briefly stopped them. "Take this exercise seriously, like you yourself are a villain," All Might said. Izuku stared at the blonde man for a few seconds before nodding. "Act like a villain, I can do that," he mumbled as the two walked inside the building. He immediately went to instructing his brown-haired partner. "Hide the bomb in the highest floor. It is confirmed that Katsuki will try to come after me, so try to fend off Ida for a while until I come to your rescue." "Understood." Uraraka took a few seconds to think through the plan, before nodding determinedly and proceeding with it in mind. Katsuki and Ida had entered the building, thus beginning the exercise. "Oi, for eyes, how many quirks does Izuku have?" Katsuki asked, not facing Ida. Instead, he was observing his surroundings, hoping to find any clues of where the bomb might be. "From what I've seen, probably 2. One is to produce fire, and the other seems to be a strength enhancer that breaks his bones whenever he uses it." To be honest, Katsuki ignored everything else the blue-haired male had to say. Why was he so distressed over his relationship with Izuku? The Chihuahua clenched his fists tightly in anger. Why isn't Izuku telling him everything? Weren't they supposed to be best friends forever? Perhaps even more. Katsuki shook his head. Now isn't the time to think about such ridiculous topics. "I'm going after him." Ida paused his explanation and stared at Katsuki in shock. "Bakugo, we need to work together. Without teamwork, we'll lose." Ida pleaded, doing chopping hand movements. "Shut up. I'm fighting him, whether you like me to or not." With that statement, Katsuki ran off. Ida sighed and continued looking around for the bomb. Katsuki has been walking around for about 3 minutes, yet there was still no sign of his best friend. The blonde was starting to get aggravated. "Izuku, come out and fight me, you stupid nerd." Katsuki yelled at the top of his lungs. A moment passed, Izuku was still nowhere to be seen. Katsuki growled. "Where are you, 𝗵𝗃𝗃𝗁𝗃?" "Right here, Kaken." As soon as he heard that, Katsuki nearly snapped his neck when his head turned to the direction of the voice. Izuku was casually standing at the end of the hallway, smiling innocently with his hands behind his back. "Hello, Kaken," Izuku greeted, bowing with a hand on his chest. Why wasn't he attacking? "What's your plan?" Izuku giggled at the blonde's question, making him fume with anger. "A villain never reveals his secrets, Katsuki." Katsuki felt a shiver run up his spine when he heard Izuku say his first name. It was silent for a few moments. Then suddenly, Izuku charged full speed towards Katsuki. Taken by surprise, Katsuki's eyes widened as he threw a right hook. Izuku managed to grab his fist and elbow, dragging his feet a full 180 degrees before slamming his opponent onto the ground. The air in Katsuki's lungs escaped as he let out a gasp. The blonde tried to get up, only for Izuku to step on his head and push it back down onto the ground. "I suggest you dash." Izuku was interrupted by Katsuki blasting a large explosion onto the floor, shooting himself up. Izuku was forced to jump away as to avoid getting injured. "That was rude, Kaken. I don't give a freckle," 𝗧𝗵𝗃𝗃 coughed as he rubbed his cheek, where there was a bruise forming. Izuku felt some sort of bullet pierce his soul when he saw 𝗧𝗵𝗃 injured. He let down his guard and jogged towards the blonde. "Kaken, are you all right?" "I'm so dash," his gift for being worried for his opponent, an explosion to the face. That was well deserved, Izuku admitted, covering his nose as blood trickled past his lips. As 𝗧𝗵𝗃 tried to land another hit, Izuku jumped away. "What happened to your telekinesis, huh?" 𝗧𝗵𝗃 growled with a scowl. Izuku felt not only blood, but sweat trickle down his face as well. Turns out I didn't have a telekinesis quirk. It was a strength enhancement quirk, Izuku said, rubbing the back of his head. 𝗧𝗵𝗃 narrowed his eyes at the 𝗧𝗓𝗏, suspicious. Izuku took his distraction as an opportunity to attack, dashing towards the blonde. He punched 𝗧𝗵𝗃 in the stomach, making him stumble back. Quickly recovering, 𝗧𝗵𝗃 aimed a right hook at Izuku. Izuku dodged and punched him in the face. "This is getting nowhere," 𝗧𝗵𝗃 concluded. He retreated a few steps, before putting a finger on the pin of one of his gauntlets. "Bakugno! Don't do that!" All Might boomed through 𝗧𝗵𝗃's headpiece. 𝗧𝗵𝗃's grin grew bigger as he replied, "He'll be fine as long as he dodges." When the blonde pulled the pin, time itself seemed to slow down for Izuku. A large blast of heat was quickly approaching him, but he couldn't move. He didn't have anywhere to go. Putting his arms over his face in an attempt to defend himself from the explosion, he unconsciously held his breath. As soon as Izuku felt intense heat touch his skin, he gritted his teeth and allowed the blazing fire to engulf him. The 𝗧𝗓𝗏 felt agonizingly hot flames lick at his skin, tearing it slightly. Then a moment of cold washed over him. It was brief, he almost didn't realize it was there. Then he didn't feel anything. No heat, no cold. He couldn't see or hear anything either, it was like his senses were completely blocked. Was he unconscious? Perhaps, There was no way an explosion like that could have killed him, right? He had been through so much as a yakuza boss, why must he die now? Izuku forced his eyes open, taking in the bright light of the hallway he was still in. He attempted to sit up, only to feel immense pain shoot through his body. He bit his lip and barely managed to contain the urge to cry out in pain. "Young Midoriya, are you all right?" All Might almost screamed in his ear. Izuku heard a ringing for a moment, before he opened his mouth to reply. "I just got hit by what felt like a bomb," Izuku groaned out sarcastically, letting out a dry chuckle. "Yeah, I think I'm perfectly fine. I'll get the paramedics dash." All Might was interrupted by Izuku. "Don't," Izuku coughed. He managed to sit up, ignoring the agonizing pain he was feeling. "I felt worse. I'll be fine." He wasn't lying either. He was still able to fight despite pain coursing through every part of his being. He even fought with a severed arm before. What was the difference now? "Young Midoriya, I will not permit you to continue this battle," All Might demanded. Izuku sent a glare to a camera he saw nearby. "I'll be fine," Izuku repeated, maintaining his glare. "Watch." The green-haired male started rising to his feet, seemingly without a problem. His outfit was almost completely intact, thanks to the special fireproof feature. Izuku stretched, hearing multiple cracks. A dislocated arm, a few non-fatal broken bones and several third-degree burns. Izuku mumbled, redirecting his gaze to the shell-shocked 𝗧𝗵𝗃 in front of him. "Were you trying to kill me?" "No, 𝗧𝗵𝗃 stammered. He just wanted to injure Izuku enough for the 𝗧𝗓𝗏 to forfeit. He never expected for him to almost die. "I'm sorry, I didn't expect the blast to be so powerful. It's fine, don't worry too much about it," Izuku responded, biting his lip as he gripped his dislocated arm. He internally screamed when he relocated his arm, hissing slightly at the pain. "Let us continue, shall we?" 𝗧𝗵𝗃's mouth gaped at what he said. He still wanted to fight even after that many injuries. "I won't fight you," 𝗧𝗵𝗃 let out a shaky breath, closing his eyes and looking down. He looked almost disappointed in himself. "I forfeit," Izuku raised a brow. "Are you looking down on me, Kaken?" 𝗧𝗵𝗃 shook his head. "I might, but I don't like seeing you hurt." The 𝗧𝗓𝗏's eyes widened as his lips formed a smile. All Might's bright blue eyes were opened wide in shock. With a gulp, he pressed a button and spoke into the microphone. 𝗵𝗃𝗲 𝗵𝗃𝗃 forfeits. His voice was a little shaky, worried for his successor. He let go of the button and glanced at the shocked faces and an unreadable face of his students. "Young Midoriya, please be careful," he mumbled, turning his head back to the screen. Izuku pressed his earpiece. "Uraraka, has 𝗳𝗍𝗏 found you?" He quickly got a reply. "Yeah. I'm trying to hold him off, but it's hard." Izuku hummed. "I'll be there soon." Izuku quickly ran to the highest floor, slightly slower due to his injuries. When he reached, he saw 𝗳𝗍𝗏 nearly touching the fake bomb. He reacted on instinct and shot flames at the blue-haired teen. It managed to make him falter and jump back from the bomb. "Oh, we've come too far to fail now," Izuku yelled, kicking 𝗳𝗏𝗏 on his side. 𝗳𝗏𝗏 fell onto the ground, grunting. "Sorry, 𝗳𝗏𝗏, but you lost the moment to step into the battlefield." Izuku finalized his statement by wrapping the capture tape around the blue-haired male. Villains 1. Recovery Girl's office. Katsuki's head laid next to Izuku's resting body. He had felt quite tired from Chiyo's healing as well, thus why his head was laying on the bed. After a while, Izuku slowly stirred awake. He tried to lift his left arm but felt something, or someone keeping it down. He tilted his head to the side and flushed when he saw Katsuki using his arm as a pillow. "Ka!" He stopped himself. He didn't want to wake the peaceful-looking blonde, despite his mind just asking him to do so. Instead, he lifted his other arm and petted Katsuki's soft blonde hair. "I love you, Katsuki." With that confession, he drifted off to sleep once again. Little did he know, Katsuki was awake the moment he felt a hand touch his hair. He had a red blush staining his cheeks as they burned hotter than the sun itself. "I love you too, Izuku," he mumbled, knowing Izuku had already drifted to sleep. At least now, he knew the greenette shared the same feelings he does. He just needs to find out how to express them. "Pardon? Could you repeat?" Izuku questioned, eyes wide as he held his phone up against his ear. The person calling him was Shigaraki Tamura, requesting for him to steal documents. "From Nisa's office." "You heard me. Steal documents from that rat's office. After that, you'll get the quirk you longing." Shigaraki responded. Izuku grinned at the request. "Is it that simple?" Izuku laughed. "Are you certain you want to give up my services so early into the infiltration?" "Yes. After all, once everything is done and dealt with, All Might will be dead and we will rule over this country." Shigaraki rasped arrogantly. Izuku hummed, trying his best to hold in his laughter. "All right, fine. You will get your documents," Izuku concluded. The two bosses said their farewells and ended the discussion. "You are foolish, Shigaraki Tamura," Izuku mumbled, placing his phone on his desk and turning off his lamplight. "How can one so arrogant such as yourself be the leader of a villain group?" Izuku smirked evilly. "I, myself, have yet to discover the answer." The next day Izuku was spinning his pencil, paying no attention to the lesson being taught by Aizawa. Instead, he was plotting when he should steal the documents. After school. No, Nizu would definitely still be in his office. The only time he would be out of his office is during lunchtime, but it will be suspicious if I left Uraraka and 𝗳𝗏𝗏. "You will be choosing class representatives. Pick someone you can trust," Aizawa stated. Immediately, almost everyone raised their hands and claimed to be a good class representative. Izuku twitched at the noise, but kept his mouth shut to avoid attention. Meanwhile, Aizawa merely rolled his eyes and crawled inside his sleeping bag. "I wish I could do that," Izuku thought, staring at the yellow sleeping bag that contained his teacher. "Silence, everyone. The class representative's duty is important. It cannot be decided so vaguely. I suggest we create an election to decide our class representatives." 𝗳𝗏𝗏 suggested, his shaky hand raised. It was quite obvious he wanted himself to be voted for. "Hold on. We don't know much of each other yet. Plus, wouldn't people just vote for themselves?" Kaminari pointed out. "That makes it even more honorable if someone gets the most votes," 𝗳𝗏𝗏 said. The class seemed to agree with the idea now. "Correct me if I am wrong," Izuku said, his act cracking at the shock he was expressing. He stared at the green board with his wide emerald eyes. He had ended up with 4 votes, the most out of everyone. Momo got 2 votes, making her vice. But I seem to have the most votes? No. Your eyes are perfectly fine, Midoriya, Ida confirmed, sulking in his seat. Izuku looked at him empathetically. He had voted for the blue-haired male. He didn't know why, he just felt like he should. Why, Ida, you could be representative instead, Izuku suggested. No, you were chosen. This role belongs to you. Ida protested against his idea. Izuku sighed, getting up from his seat and standing next to Momo. Before I accept this role, may I know who had voted for me? Izuku asked, putting his hands behind his back. Uraraka, Ida and Todoroki raised their hands. Izuku was slightly surprised that Todoroki had voted for him, but just shoved the thought away. That's 3. Izuku decided to let his act drop slightly, seeing as he was slightly upset no one besides him had voted for Ida. Katsuki hesitantly raised his hand. Everyone, including Izuku, looked at the blonde with wide eyes. Out of everyone, I never expected you to be the one to vote for me, Izuku mumbled, a light blush on his cheeks. He cleared his throat. Let's go for lunch. Izuku had just bought his food and was about to sit with his usual pair, Ida and Uraraka. But Izuku! Katsuki yelled, successfully gaining the attention of the greenette. Sit with me today. Izuku only stood there, feeling perplexed. Kaken wants to sit with me. He did a cute head tilt to the side. Are you deaf? Come sit with me, 𝗵𝗵𝗃𝗧𝗏. Katsuki repeated, a light shade of pink dusting his cheeks. Izuku turned his head to Ida and Uraraka, who nodded their heads approvingly. Izuku shrugged and walked over to his best friend. Izuku was about to pull the chair, when Katsuki did it for him. Sit, Katsuki demanded in a surprisingly low voice. Thanks, Izuku mumbled, obliging Katsuki's demand. Mina looked at the two with googly eyes, grinning widely and jumping up and down in her seat enthusiastically. Kirishima, who had noticed the pink-skinned girl's weird antics, tapped her on the shoulder. Why are you so excited? The red-haired boy asked as Mina calmed down slightly. Don't you see it? She whisper-yelled, pointing to the blonde and greenette talking calmly to each other while eating their food. After a moment, Kirishima seemed to get it and his eyes widened in realization. He started squealing along with Mina, earning strange looks from the rest of the Baku squad. Suddenly an alarm rang, startling everyone. What's going on? Uraraka shouted as every student in the cafeteria got up and rushed to the exit. It's a 3rd-level security breach. In my 3 years of going here, this has never happened. A 3rd year shouted, running towards the cafeteria exit. Izuku looked out of a window and noticed it was just the press. However, something else caught his eye. The gate. It's disintegrated. A light bulb appeared at the side of Izuku's head as he got up and ran towards the exit as well, ignoring the protests of his friends. Stay here, it's just the press. Tell the others. Izuku yelled in a demanding tone, causing some of his classmates to shudder and nod. Izuku was able to escape the horde with multiple scratches and bruises. He quickly dashed through the hallways towards 𝗍𝗔's office, making sure to be as sneaky as possible. Once he got to the office, he used a pin he always kept in his pocket and swiftly unlocked it. He opened the door slightly and peeked inside. After he made sure there were no security cameras, he silently snuck to a stack of papers on the desk. He rummaged through it, glancing at the door a few times. After he got what he needed, 𝗏𝗏's documents, he kept it under his blazer and ran out of the room, making sure to lock the door. Taking a deep breath, he dashed back down to the hallway, where he saw many students dispersing. He looked up and saw Ida floating, breathing heavily. Excellent work, Ida. Izuku smiled. He then approached his classmates. Oh my Midoriya. What happened to you? Momo asked, inspecting Izuku's scratches and bruises. I just got shoved around in the horde of students, no biggie. Izuku replied. 𝗵𝗵𝗃𝗧𝗏. Where did you go anyway? Katsuki yelled at him, trying to hide his worry. She got knocked down the stairs, he quickly covered. Katsuki's expression shifted into one of worry as he grabbed the greenette's wrist and dragged him away. Izuku let out a yelp of surprise at the sudden action. We're going to recovery, girl. I'm not letting you protest, Katsuki yelled. Izuku blushed madly while looking at the blonde with wide eyes. Oh my, what did I say about injuring yourself? Recovery girl berated as she used her quirk on Izuku. I'm fine, Izuku whined. Katsuki, who still had a firm grip on Izuku's wrist, squeezed it tightly. Kadash, shut up. Do you know how worried I get when you're injured? Even the tiniest scratch, Katsuki gritted his teeth and looked down onto his lap. Izuku barely missed the tears that were threatening to fall out of the blonde's eyes. I can't risk losing you, Izuku. To say Izuku was surprised is an understatement. He was beyond shocked. Katsuki has never shown so much emotion. To him before, it concerned him. He didn't want him to worry any further. He placed a comforting hand on Katsuki's cheek, causing the blonde to look at him. I'm not going anywhere, Kaken. Izuku smiled reassuringly. Katsuki embraced him, and the greenette did the same. Izuku's POV, it was a pleasure working with you, I lied, giving Shigaraki a yellow folder filled with information. I was back in my villain suit, with the black hair dye, red contact lenses and mask. The blue-haired villain scratched his neck while taking the folder, grinning creepily. Your reward is that way, Shigaraki directed rudely, pointing at a wooden door. I hummed, slightly aggravated with the villain, and trailed his finger. Opening the door, I peeked inside. The room was quite dark, with the only source of light being a ceiling light that was shining onto a figure like a spotlight. The figure had tubes poking out of their body. Talk about disturbing. I carefully stepped into the room. The atmosphere was eerie and scary, though I was not concerned in the slightest. Welcome, Midoriya Izuku, the figure spoke. So he knows my true identity, as I had guessed. There is a possibility that he is exactly who I think he is. All for one, I growled with malice evident in my tone. I crossed my arms and glared at All Might's mutual nemesis. He chuckled. It's a pleasure to finally meet you, Izuku. I am quite impressed. You managed to escape All Might. You were not unscathed, but you survived nonetheless, I admitted truthfully, glaring at him. You flatter me, boy. But I doubt you wouldn't be able to escape him as well, All for One said. I growled menacingly under my breath, attempting to earn my favor. Oh, how cunning, I chuckled darkly, walking closer to the old man. Now, are you going to give me my part of the deal? Yes. Though, I am quite disappointed in 𝗵𝗲. He has always only been useful for being a vessel, I scowled, disgusted with him. He only sees Shigaraki as a tool, a stepping stone to get what he desires. You are utterly disgusting, I spat, glaring angrily at Shigaraki's supposed father figure. He merely laughed and placed a hand on my head. If things were to turn out different, you could be my successor instead. You would be a great leader of my group, All for One explained. I rolled my eyes at his attempt to persuade me to join his petty league of villains. He should know by now that I do not plan to rule over an empire. I simply strive to be my own hero. Suddenly, I felt overwhelming pain shoot through my body. It felt as if my body was being torn apart agonizingly slow. I yelled out in pain and stumbled back, clutching my head with my hands. You should know that having a fourth quirk would bring along consequences, All for One said, grinning triumphantly. I could barely hear him as the burning sensation in my body got stronger. Eventually I passed out. My vision was blurry as I awoke from my slumber. My head still hurt like a female dog, causing me to immediately reach my hand up and grasp it. At least the rest of my body did not feel as bad. Did you learn your lesson? Came a voice I barely recognized. I realized I was laying on a silky couch, located on the opposite of a bar counter. How long have I been here? I asked, ignoring his question. I sat up and rubbed my temples. Then I looked to the left and saw Kurogiri wiping a glass cup. Around 2 hours. I'm surprised. Not many people can still function with 4 quirks in their system, told Kurogiri. I nodded, acknowledging his presumed compliment. It is 1 a.m, then, I assumed. Kurogiri nodded, putting down the squeaky clean glass and grabbing another one. I stayed there in silence for a few more minutes, massaging my throbbing head. So what quirk did 𝗵𝘃𝗲 give you? Kurogiri asked. I glanced at him before looking down to my hands. It should be a rapid regeneration quirk. The name is self-explanatory, I said, getting up from the couch and sitting on a bar stool. 𝗃𝗧𝗍𝗔 shot me a questioning look. "A cup of tequila," I ordered, resting my head on the counter. "You're too young to be drinking, Mr. Decipher," 𝗃𝗧𝗍𝗔 berated. I chuckled, bringing my head up to stare into his glowing yellow eyes. "I'm too young to be a yakuza boss as well." "Yet, here I am," I retorted, massaging the bridge of my nose. "Now, are you going to give me my shot of tequila?" 𝗃𝗧𝗍𝗔 sighed in defeat, pouring me a glass and handing it to me. "Do not worry, this is the only shot I will have here," I assured, drinking the whole thing in one gulp. After a moment of contemplating my life choices, I got up from the stool and walked towards the exit. "Goodbye, Decipher," 𝗃𝗧𝗍𝗔 waved. I stared at him, before smiling and waving politely as I left the LOV's base. "Today we are going to do rescue training," Izuku said, probably irritated he has to actually teach. "You did not think I would hand over information without looking through it myself, did you?" Based on the folder I stole from Nisa's office, Class A will be going to the USJ to practice rescue training today. No, it is not the Universal Studios Japan. It is short for Unforeseen Simulation Joint, quite a mouthful. Izuku explained that we could use our hero costumes if wanted. Using our hero costumes could get us accustomed to them, making hero work much easier. So yes, I decided I should use my hero suit. As 𝗬𝗏 explained about quirks and how they could be used to easily save and also kill, my mind wandered. I could not shake the feeling that something bad was about to happen, something that could prove to be scarring. Suddenly, in the corner of my eye, I saw a purple swirl form in the middle of the UA. 𝗃𝗧𝗍𝗔. My mind went on autopilot, and I stood in front of my classmates defensively. "Midoriya." I heard Uraraka call from behind me. "Midoriya, chill, they're probably fake villains," Kirishima tried to assure. Though, I could hear the unsureness in his tone. "Trust me, they're not," I warned. Izuku got into a fighting position from beside me. A multitude of villains started pouring from the large portal. "Mr. Izuku, let me help. Your quirk isn't suited for so many people," he shook his head. "What type of pro hero only has one trick up their sleeve?" "Fair enough." He jumped into the fray, taking out a trio right off the bat. Meanwhile, I pushed everyone to the exit. "Go get help from the teachers." I yelled at them. But it was too late. "Hello there. I am 𝗃𝗧𝗍𝗔 of the League of Villains. We have come to kill All Might," 𝗃𝗧𝗍𝗔 introduced. Normally, I would have laughed at him, but now is not the time. Kaken and Kirishima stupidly ran at him to attack him. What were they thinking? Before I could yell at them, 𝗃𝗧𝗍𝗔 engulfed the majority of us and split us up. I opened my eyes and found myself falling into thick, blue water. I put my arms in front of me defensively, holding my breath as I dropped into the water. I opened my eyes slowly and saw a villain approaching me at high speeds. Luckily, 𝗬𝗍𝗍 wrapped me with her tongue and pulled me out of the water. "We're all gonna die." 𝗵𝗃𝗲 cried as I landed beside him, 𝗬𝗍𝗍 landing perfectly in front of the both of us soon after. "Calm down, 𝗵𝗃𝗲, 𝗬𝗍𝗍 said. I got up from my sitting position and observed my surroundings. We were in the shipwreck zone. 𝗬𝗍𝗍 has a frog-like quirk. If they sent her here, that means they do not know our quirks. "Interesting discovery, Midoriya," 𝗬𝗍𝗍 complimented. I must have been mumbling. I really need to get rid of that habit. "Thank you, 𝗬𝗍𝗍, I thanked. She sent a glare at my direction. "Call me Tsu," she demanded. I stared at her in disbelief. Before I could say anything, the boat started shaking. "I'm starting to get bored down here. Let's just attack him," a villain yelled. They could have really powerful quirks for all we know. It's dangerous to attack them, at least not all of them are stupid. I gave a death glare to the villains below us. Some flinched back, making a smirk crawl to my lips. "I can formulate a plan," I said, turning to face my two companions. "But I will need detailed explanations of your quirks." Tsu and 𝗵𝗃𝗲 explained their quirks to me in great detail, just as I asked. When 𝗵𝗃𝗲 explained his, Tsu and I stared at him. Honestly, I expected something more useful. Though who am I to judge? I started contemplating our choices, quickly formulating a plan within a few seconds. Suddenly, the boat started shaking, then sinking. I can't wait any longer. A villain yelled impatiently. All right, I looked up at 𝗬𝗵𝗲. I have a plan. After briefly explaining the plan, I quickly jumped off the boat and aimed my right hand at the villains. I smiled sweetly at them before flicking my finger. Midoriya, is your finger okay? 𝗬𝗵𝗲 asked as we were making our way to the central plaza. Yes, it's fine, I assured. In fact, it was perfectly fine. The moment we landed, it was already healed with no injuries to be seen. Quirks are fascinating. If you say so, ribbit, 𝗬𝗧 sighed in relief. I smiled at her and turned my attention back to the central plaza. The closer we got, the more clear the situation was. Laying there, beaten and broken, was our teacher. A menacing black bird-like creature was twisting an arm of his in a very unsightly way. Just witnessing the violent scene unravel made me shudder. Aizawa was close to passing out, he might even die. That much we knew. Suddenly, something flared from within me. Something I hoped would never awaken. The need to save. Adrenaline rushed through my veins as I ran at top speeds toward the bird-like creature. Don't touch Mr. Aizawa. I yelled at the top of my lungs, powering up one for all in my right arm as I pulled it back. A huge blast of wind pressure tore through the surrounding air. I landed the hit, but this time, my arm didn't break. An improvement. The smoke cleared and revealed the bird-like creature standing strong. Though it was distracted from Aizawa at the moment, it was not affected by the punch at all. I jumped back in alarm. I cannot deny that I was worried about the witness's safety. That punch was strong. Shigaraki mumbled. I side-glanced him, but kept my guard up around the bird-like creature. Shigaraki started scratching his neck in what I assume is irritation. I smirked at the sight. He was intimidated by me. I redirected my gaze back to the black bird. It seems to be waiting for commands. Unexpectedly, Shigaraki smirked and lowered his hand from his neck. Then he pointed his finger at me. No mood change of plans. Kill him. Before I could even register what he said, I was thrown back a few meters. If I hadn't caught myself with telekinesis before I hit the wall, I would definitely have a broken spine and possibly skull. Multiple quirks. That's unfair. Shigaraki yelled. I knew he was addicted to video games, but for him to be this out of touch from the war, crash. It was fast, too fast for my eyes to follow. I was slammed into a wall. I grunted and tried to rise to my feet, only to get hit again and fly across the USJ. I didn't even see what was hitting me, but I was sure it was 𝗵𝗲. It was a good thing I asked for a regeneration quirk. My wounds were instantaneously being regenerated. It felt like needles piercing my skin, but I will be fine. Either way, it does not matter. I was too aggravated to pay any mind to the pain. I was completely angered. After all those years of harsh training, I am unable to compete against a mere overgrown bird with muscle. How could one be so powerful? I rose to my feet, blood seeping down my head. 𝗵𝗲 will not hurt anyone else. I simply will not allow it. Aizawa was mortified. He just watched one of his students get thrown around like a rag doll, while he laid on the ground helplessly. It was a horrible thing to witness a child get beaten to a pulp and to be unable to do anything about it. 𝗵𝗃𝗲 Aizawa barely managed to whisper in an attempt to reach out to his student. It wasn't working. He knew his student will never come back. It was impossible to survive such powerful blows from that monstrous creature. A shiver went up his possibly damaged spine, causing him to wince. Midoriya? He whispered, losing hope. He couldn't do anything. If he couldn't even save one student, how can he call himself a teacher? Just then, the doors of the USJ slammed open. It's all right now. What? The familiar voice was reassuring. It brought a sense of relief to Aizawa and the students present in the central plaza. Because I am here. All Might's booming voice was loud and filled with rage. Aizawa could have sworn it echoed throughout the whole USJ. Immediately, like a speeding bullet, All Might rescued everyone in the central plaza, including Aizawa. The sleep-deprived hero was carried to safety by All Might. However, Despite the slight reassurance from All Might's presence, Aizawa couldn't get his mind off of Midoriya. Images of the green-haired teen drowning in his own puddle of blood occupied Aizawa's mind. "And Midoriya?" Aizawa mumbled, though it came out as barely a whisper. It seemed to catch All Might's attention as the blonde hero turned his head to meet Aizawa's eyes. "What about young Midoriya? Is he all right?" Aizawa barely managed to shake his head and turn it to the direction Midoriya was blasted off to. A look of worry was very much evident on his features. All Might nodded thoughtfully. "Don't worry, I will save young Midoriya." When he returned to the doors of the USJ, he immediately attacked every villain present. He made sure none of them were conscious before turning to Shigaraki. "All Might." Shigaraki rasped, grinning widely. He called, "Nomu," and pointed at the blonde hero. "Nomu, kill him." Izuku needed some time to regenerate. If it were not for the rapid healing, he would be dead the moment he landed from Nomu's last attack. He growled, unsatisfied with how much he could do. "I was under the impression I was strong enough to handle anything," Izuku muttered, placing a bloody hand on his forehead. He sighed. "I guess there is no helping it. I am only human after all." Feeling a sense of calmness, he stood up from the ground and stared at the barely noticeable central plaza. He stretched his limbs. "All Might should be here by now," he muttered, slightly disappointed as he cannot cause harm to Nomu. He shrugged and started walking back to the central plaza. All Might was struggling. Nomu was as strong as him, if not stronger. As Shigaraki mentioned, it has multiple quirks. Most likely shock absorption, super regeneration, and super strength. All Might didn't know how he was going to defeat Nomu, but one thing is as clear as day. It will be difficult. He might even risk exposing his true form to his students. How did he get into this situation? All Might was stuck in an uncomfortable position. His back, as well as Nomu's, was bent backwards. Nomu's fingers were digging into the hero's injury in the right side of his abdomen. The mist villain, 𝗬𝗓𝗄, had a portal that was slowly closing in on him. The portal would close soon, therefore cutting off the top half of his body. For a split second, All Might wished. He wished for someone to save him like he did them. A large explosion rang out in the USJ. Bakugo had his hands on 𝗬𝗓𝗄's metal plate, ready to rid it from existence. 𝗬𝗓𝗄 tried to move, but the blonde had other plans. "You try to do anything funny and I'll blow you up right now, you got it?" Bakugo sneered, a sadistic grin on his features. "They'll be cleaning you up for weeks." "Ooh, that doesn't sound very heroic," Kirishima sweat dropped. Izuku stretched as he entered the central plaza. "Such a long walk," he muttered, annoyed. "Midoriya." Izuku heard Todoroki call. The 𝗧𝗓𝗄𝗵𝗲 boy breathed heavily as he and multiple others came up to Izuku. "Todoroki, is everyone all right?" The greenette asked, showing slight concern for his classmates. "Are you all right? We saw you get blown away," Todoroki asked worriedly. Izuku's eye twitched. "I'm fine, it wasn't that bad," he covered. Todoroki hesitantly nodded. Bakugo and Kirishima went to fight the villains. "We need to help them," Mina suggested. Izuku shook his head discreetly. "We should stay out of All Might's way. We'll just be a nuisance if we try to help," a few agreed. Though they decided to watch the fight just in case. When they reached, they saw All Might supposedly standing strong. He was trying to provoke the villains. "Something isn't right," Izuku mumbled, staring at All Might's smoking body. His classmates looked at him curiously. He ignored the looks as he stepped forward. It was a risk, to use one for all with a regeneration quirk flowing through his veins. It would noticeably heal, and All Might would see it. No doubt he would get questions from Aizawa as well. If he uses his telekinesis, his classmates would notice as his eyes glow a vibrant green whenever he uses it. Izuku gritted his teeth in distraught as he debated whether or not to help the blonde hero. This was troublesome. The greenette didn't have much time to think as Shigaraki sprinted towards All Might, hands ready to disintegrate the hero. Izuku powered up one for all in his legs and blasted himself off of the ground and towards Shigaraki. He aimed a punch to the blue-haired male. Time seemed to slow down as a portal appeared in front of him, Shigaraki's hand coming through and almost touching Izuku's nose. The green-haired teen reacted quickly, using telekinesis to redirect Shigaraki's hand elsewhere. Bang! Bang! Gunshots echoed throughout the USJ. One bullet got Shigaraki on the arm, while the other got his leg. The blue-haired male grunted in pain as he landed harshly on the ground. 𝗵𝗃𝗲𝗄𝗧𝗔𝗂𝗪. Shigaraki scratched his neck. More gunshots echoed. 2 more bullets abruptly shot his other leg and arm. Luckily for him, 𝗬𝗓𝗫 protected him from the bullets with his quirk. 𝗬𝗓𝗫 growled lowly as 13, still injured, used their quirk to try and SCK up the portal. 𝗬𝗓𝗫 barely managed to teleport away before any more damage could be done. Izuku sighed as he got up from his sitting position, his legs already healed. A cement wall rose from the ground and sheltered him and All Might from the view of his classmates. "Why, young Midoriya?" All Might mumbled, unable to express his confusion. With a puff of smoke, he returned to his skeletal form. "I will explain later, to the whole of UA staff," Izuku concluded, massaging his temples. Why did he decide to continue attending UA again? He still has All Might's quirk. The green-haired boy mentally noted to give All Might's quirk back to him. Izuku sat on a silky lavender couch. In front of him was a coffee table made of glass, with Nizu, Toshinori and Aizawa sitting on the opposite couch. Izuku was pleased to find that even Nizu, despite his tight schedule, attended such a short-noticed meeting. However, the greenette was slightly upset to see Aizawa all bandaged up from head to toe. "Is this about the USJ attack?" Nizu asked curiously. Izuku glanced at the principal and merely nodded thoughtfully. The green-haired mafia leader drew a contented sigh before opening his mouth to speak. "I am not who I seem to be," Izuku started with. At the moment he wished he had a drink. He speaks faintly better at conversations when he has something to distract himself from the social interaction. "What does that mean, Midoriya?" Aizawa asked, getting slightly interested. Izuku took a deep breath and met eyes with the 3 teachers in front of him. "If I tell you, you must swear to never tell anyone," Izuku threatened as he shifted uncomfortably on the couch he was sitting on. "If you do, there will be consequences." The teachers hesitantly nodded, slightly intimidated. Izuku took a deep breath. "When I was 8 years old, my mother died in a house fire." Izuku cringed at how much his explanation was going to sound like a villain monologue. The teachers were surprised for a moment, before they nodded. They dared not speak. The fact did not go unnoticed by Izuku as it brought a smirk to his soft lips. The condescending smirk disappeared almost as fast as it appeared when he remembered the topic at hand. "Heroes tried to save her, to no avail. She was the light of my life, one of the reasons I felt positive for 8 years. Do you know how much sorrow I felt?" The teachers' faces softened as they felt empathy for the young teen. They could imagine how it must have felt to lose someone who has been there for the majority of your life. "Well, except Toshinori. So I ran away." The teachers looked confused at Izuku's bold statement, silently prompting him to explain. The green-haired mafia leader seemed to read their expressions, as he continued. "I did not want to be orphaned. That would be far too troublesome." Seeing the looks of understanding on the teachers' faces, Izuku took another deep breath. "It was not long before I bumped into a person, a woman. Her name is 𝗓𝗃𝗵𝗄𝗧𝗔𝗂𝗪. She became my rightful guardian. Of course, she could never replace my biological mother, but she cares for me. She treats me as if I am her own flesh and blood," Izuku explained. The teachers nodded once again, silently wondering where his explanation was heading. "When I was late 11 years old, I realized something. Heroes are not enough." Izuku's voice shifted from timid to confident, as if he was stating his opinion as an undeniable fact. "What do you mean?" Toshinori asked. Izuku smiled sweetly at the hero, understanding his confusion. "When heroes arrest villains, they have a slight chance to escape. That slight chance could bring upon dismay to the civilians," Izuku explained. Once again, the teachers did not understand what he was getting at. So instead of arresting villains, what else could the heroes do? Seconds ticked by. As they did, Nizu's beady black eyes noticeably became slightly wider in realization. Izuku, being as observant as ever, smirked at the display. Kill them, 𝗵𝗍 mumbled, his tone mixed in one of abhorrence and amusement. The other two teachers gasped at the principal's revelation. Izuku mumbled, staring at Izuku in an almost sickly manner. Who are you really? I am Midoriya Izuku. All of you know this, Izuku grinned brightly. Then suddenly, his eyes smoldered a grim emerald color and his bright grin shifted into an impudent smirk. Young Midoriya? 𝗧𝗵𝗲 questioned worriedly, eyeing the brunette with hope-filled eyes. Hope that vanished as soon as Izuku chuckled darkly. Tone pervaded with malice. Yes. You know me as Midoriya? Izuku paused, eyes shooting to his teachers with pure malicious intent. But do you acknowledge me as Decipher? Immediately, Izuku stood up from his seat and took an offensive posture. 𝗵𝗍 and 𝗧𝗵𝗲 sat down. One because they believed they could do nothing of the situation, and the other was in denial. Izuku rolled his eyes and leisurely stood up from the couch with a sweet smile as if he did not have red eyes glaring at him. Why are you so surprised? Izuku asked, noticing the paled expression on 𝗧𝗵𝗲's face. The pro-hero looked up with guilty eyes, while Izuku stared down at him with a pout. You said I was hero material, did you change your mind? I never thought you'd be a villain. 𝗧𝗵𝗲 admitted solemnly, lowering his head in shame. Izuku's lips formed a frown at the sight. You gave me one for all because you trusted me. Do not worry, Izuku chuckled drily, sitting back down on his seat and clenched his hands into fists. I am a lot of things, but I am no traitor. How can we trust you? Izuku barked, trying his hardest to contain his composure. Izuku glanced at the hero for a moment, before sighing. I never wanted to become a villain. I just wanted what is best for this selfish world, Izuku admitted solemnly. Izuku lowered his stance slightly and took a moment to stare at the brunette, seemingly contemplating. Even if you want a better world, your actions cannot be justified. Izuku sighed, walking around the glass table and towards Izuku. The green-haired boy had his head held low, his eyes sheltered by his hair to avoid showing emotion to the teachers. The underground hero placed a comforting hand on the brunette's greenish-black hair, startling him a little. You're young. You can still change your ways, the hero suggested with a small smile. Izuku looked up at him and scowled, slapping his hand away. Do you think I do not already know that? Izuku snapped angrily. He usually has a better hold on his emotions, but heroes has always been a sensitive topic for him. I could never leave my yakuza even I wanted to. Too many people have pledged alliances with me. I would have a bounty on my head if I quit now. Young Midoriya? 𝗧𝗵𝗲 walked towards the brunette. Izuku tried to back away but, to his shock, was pulled into a comfortable hug. I don't regret my choice, at least not completely. Izuku's eyes widened at the blonde's statement. He stuttered unintentionally. Taking a moment to snap away from his thoughts, he pushed 𝗧𝗵𝗲 away. But you should resent me. There's no reason to. I know my quirk is in safe hands. 𝗧𝗵𝗲 smiled sweetly at Izuku, who shunned it with a bitter scowl. All Might's right. We have no reason to hate you, 𝗵𝗍 chimed in, causing the others in the room to glance at him momentarily. As long as you don't hurt anyone else, Izuku growled at the last statement. This is the field of work that I do. You cannot force me to do anything. The green-haired villain stood up from his seat and was about to leave. Just like in Recovery Girl's office, 𝗧𝗵𝗲 grabbed onto his wrist in desperation. We know that, but you are still a child. What kind of heroes would we be if we let you ruin your future like this? The blonde retorted. Izuku started trembling uncontrollably as he shook his head deniably. Let me go! Izuku yelled at the blonde hero, trying to pull his away aggressively. Izuku stepped in and wrapped his capture weapon around Izuku's abdomen in an attempt to restrain the boy. In a flash, Izuku went flying across the room along with his weapon. Izuku glared at 𝗧𝗵𝗲 with glowing emerald eyes. Despite the terrifying display, 𝗧𝗵𝗲 could see the pain in the brunette's eyes. Let go of me. I do not wish to harm you, Izuku growled, his voice slow and threatening. 𝗧𝗵𝗲 had no other choice but to let go of the brunette's wrist. A faint red mark stained Izuku's wrist, causing the green-haired villain to rub it subconsciously. Thank you. Now I shall take my leave. Izuku placed his hand on the doorknob and held it firmly. Wait, Nizu called. Izuku sighed and turned his head to look at the principal expectantly. Are you going to attend classes tomorrow? Yeah, out of all questions. Izuku looked at him weirdly, before sighing again. Possibly, he mumbled, just loud enough for Nizu to hear. The principal gave him a grateful smile as he opened the door. He paused in his step, glancing at the teachers one last time, before walking out and closing the door behind him. Hey kid, 𝗵𝗃𝗧𝗏 said from Izuku's room doorway. The greenette hummed in acknowledgement as he typed furiously on his keyboard. Selling on the black market again. Izuku's rapid typing came to an abrupt stop and he turned his chair to face his adoptive parent. Can I help you, 𝗵𝗃𝗧𝗏? Izuku asked harshly. The events of the day still replayed in his memory, causing him to be more moody than usual. Harsh, the scarlet-haired woman chuckled as she walked closer to the greenette. What's gotten you so upset, boss? Izuku was silent for a moment. Nothing. He mumbled. There's obviously something, Izuku. It's better to talk about it, 𝗵𝗃𝗧𝗏 pestered, kneeling in front of the greenette. Izuku gave in and sighed. I told 𝗳𝗵𝗃𝗧𝗏 and Nizu my identity. Izuku admitted, biting his bottom lip anxiously. 𝗵𝗃𝗧𝗏's eyes widened. Why? The red-haired woman asked sternly, grabbing Izuku's stiff shoulders. During the USJ incident, my instincts kicked in and I used one for all. I landed beside All Might. He saw my legs instantaneously heal, Izuku briefly summarized, a solemn expression on his face. 𝗵𝗃𝗧𝗏 sighed and kissed Izuku's freckled cheek to reassure him. They didn't hurt you, did they? 𝗵𝗃𝗧𝗏 asked worriedly. Izuku subconsciously rubbed his wrist, where 𝗧𝗏𝗃𝗧𝗏 had grabbed him. It was already completely healed, but Izuku couldn't help but think back to the moment. Recognizing the gesture, 𝗵𝗃𝗧𝗏's overprotective mother instincts kicked in as her eyes narrowed threateningly. Who did it? She asked quickly. Izuku flinched slightly at her reaction. It was not that bad. Besides, it's gone now. Izuku tried to assure, only for his mother figure to grow angrier. Izuku, who did it? It was more of a statement than a question. Obviously, 𝗵𝗃𝗧𝗏 was not a normal mother. If someone hurts her son, even if he is not BLD related, even if the injury had already healed, she will not hesitate to cut the head of whoever hurt him. All Might. Izuku sighed, knowing there was no getting away from a furious 𝗵𝗃𝗧𝗏. The scarlet-haired villain fumed with anger, unintentionally gripping Izuku's shoulders tighter. 𝗵𝗃𝗧𝗏, Izuku whispered. Blinded by rage, the red-haired woman didn't answer as her thoughts were filled to the brim with plans to eradicate 𝗧𝗏𝗃𝗧𝗏. Rashingu, Izuku tried again, slightly louder. The adoptive mother still seemed oblivious to her son's calls, thinking deeper. Mother! Izuku finally yelled. 𝗵𝗃𝗧𝗏 jumped at the loud noise, immediately turning to face her son. Izuku sighed. I am perfectly fine. It already healed. Izuku gestured to his wrist to prove a point. This time, it was 𝗵𝗃𝗧𝗏's turn to sigh. She embraced her son in a tight hug that could seemingly last forever. I'm sorry, Aizu, but you know how protective I am about these things. 𝗵𝗃𝗧𝗏 pulled away from the hug and smiled sweetly at Izuku. The greenette returned the gesture gratefully. I know, the sports festival. An event that is important to those of UA who wish to go down the path of heroes. An event in which Izuku has no interest in participating in. However, here he is, listening to Aizawa ramble about the importance of the UA Sports Festival. He decided to continue attending UA, as he had grown quite attached to the school, much to his displeasure and worry. Aizawa kept sparing glances to the greenette, making the student disputably scowl in return. When class ended, Izuku instantaneously got up from his seat and walked towards the classroom door. Once he opened it, he groaned impatiently at the commotion displayed in front of his eyes. The rest of Class A turned their heads to face the door as well, surprised. What is this? Izuku growled in annoyance. Every first year in UA stood in front of him, chattering amongst themselves. Can't he eat lunch without being disturbed? What business do you have with Class A? Ida asked, mechanically chopping his arms. We can't get through. Mineta grumbled in annoyance. What are they doing here, anyway? Scouting out the enemy, small fry, Katsuki scowled, surprisingly calm. Izuku spared the blonde a thoughtful glance as he stood next to him. They want to see the class that defeated villains. Is this the famous Class A? A masculine voice asked in a mocking tone. The male pushed past the crowd and glared at Katsuki with his mesmerizing purple eyes. Is everyone here the same as him? Please let us through. We are trying to get to the cafeteria, Izuku asked with politeness his face did not display, if you could see the slight twitch on his curved lips. He didn't get to eat dinner, as he was too busy selling things on the black market. He also missed breakfast because he needed to rush to school, so he was really hungry. You know, at the sports festival, those of us who try hard enough and get recognized might be able to move into the hero course. The lavender-haired teen said, ignoring Izuku's statement. The mafia leader clenched his hands into fists as if he was getting ready to punch something or someone. That means that any of you could be transferred out if any of us got in, he pointed at the students of 1A, before pointing at the students behind him. The crowd was surprisingly quiet. Katsuki suddenly grabbed onto Izuku's wrist, that was trembling with anger. The greenette immediately relaxed, surprised at the sudden but comfortable contact. I don't give a duck. Just let us through before I blast all of you to hell, Katsuki threatened, causing the purple-haired male to flinch and scowl. I am 𝗳𝗏𝗄𝗧𝗏. I have come to declare war, the teen, 𝗳𝗏𝗄𝗧𝗏, declared. The declaration of war almost interested Izuku, but he remembered that lunch is first priority at the moment. I suggest that you move out of the way, 𝗳𝗏𝗄𝗧𝗏, before I make you. Izuku narrowed his eyes at 𝗳𝗏𝗄𝗧𝗏, who flinched back in alarm. Katsuki flashed the faintest smirk to the suddenly confident greenette. Some future heroes you are, 𝗳𝗏𝗄𝗧𝗏 snarled, turning to leave. Izuku narrowed his eyes at the purple-haired teen. Soon after he left, the crowd dispersed. Izuku sighed. Future heroes, huh? He chuckled. He looked down onto his wrist, that Katsuki still held firmly onto, and stared at it. Kaken, I love your warmth, but aren't you going a little far with that knowledge? The blonde finally seemed to notice his hand gripping tightly around Izuku's wrist, as he pulled away hastily. The faintest sign of a blush spread across his cheeks and he looked away in embarrassment. Sorry, Izuku, Katsuki hesitantly mumbled. Izuku smiled fondly at the blonde, before wrapping an arm around his friends. Instantly, their arms locked together like chains. The bold action startled Katsuki. Remember when we used to do this when we were kids? Izuku chuckled with a bright grin. Katsuki stared at the greenette for a moment and smiled. Yeah, he mumbled. Class A watched the interaction with growing admiration and interest. Soon, the pair strode away towards the cafeteria. That was... 𝗧𝗏𝗏 mumbled. So cute. Mina continued, squealing at the sheer amount of cuteness. Todoroki narrowed his eyes at the two, his gaze focused mainly on Izuku. Why does he seem so fake? The class that fought off villains, Class 1A. Present, Mike announced. The audience screamed with enthusiasm at the mention of the class. Class A walked out of their tunnel, Izuku being at the very front. Every step they took, the more tense the arena got. At least, that was how Class A felt. All the cheers of the audience were drowned out, leaving a tense atmosphere around the hero class. It felt as if the air was crushing their lungs, begging to come out. The class stopped near a podium, finally able to breathe a little. Luckily, their nervousness didn't show. Soon, other classes joined in and stood next to them in a crowd of students. Midnight walked onto stage, immediately receiving deadpan looks from every first year. That shouldn't be legal, Kirishima whispered to Izuku unknowingly. The greenette blinked at him and slowly nodded, uncertain of what response he should give. The green-haired male then noticed a certain lavender-haired male in the corner of his eye. He frowned a little. He never meant to be rude to the teen, he was just extremely hungry. He has never missed a meal, even if it is just bread and cheese. The first round will be. Midnight spun a wheel, gaining back Izuku's attention. The wheel landed on obstacle course. Remember, only the first 100 people will advance to the next round. Good luck. What a silly thing to rely on. Every student stood at the beginning of the obstacle course. Izuku was one of the people in the back, seeing as he didn't actually care about the extra exercise. Also, he realized that the tunnel they will all be running through was too cramped. It is definitely the first obstacle. After stretching his limbs, he dragged a foot behind him and placed his hands on the ground below him. He had no other choice but to be quirkless in this race, may as well be his fastest. Start! The ringing sound of the horn blew. Immediately, everyone took off. Izuku ran past a few slow pokes. It seemed his theory was correct as people started getting stuck in the tunnel. Somehow, Todoroki got through and started using his ice, making a few other contestants slip in the meantime. Izuku growled, pushing through the crowd with brute force and instantly evaporating the ice with his fire. He dashed away from the crowd of students and started catching up to his classmates. "Oh, Class A is unstoppable. What are you teaching them, Eraser?" 𝗵𝗃𝗃𝗁𝗍 shouted in surprise. Izuku merely shook his head. "I didn't teach them anything. They simply learnt to not hold back," Izuku explained with a dead-inside voice. 𝗵𝗃𝗃𝗁 listened with interest. He almost forgot to make another announcement. "Remember these?" 𝗵𝗃𝗃𝗁 shouted as robots rose from the ground and started attacking the students nearby. "They're the 0-pointers from the entrance exam." Izuku growled as he jumped to the side to avoid an attack from a robot. "Just how much money does this school harbor?" He burnt the robot to ashes and continued running. "I expected this to be harder," Todoroki mumbled with a little disappointment, freezing a 0-pointer with one flick of his hand. Seeing how unstable it was, Izuku went around it. That was when something caught his eye. A shiny glimmer of a green metal plate. He didn't know why, but he decided to take. The mafia leader heard a loud crash from behind him, and he instinctively turned his head to its direction. Kirishima and Tetsu were all right, much to his relief. He sighed, before continuing in his sprint. Lo and behold! The third obstacle, the pitfall of death. 𝗵𝗃𝗃𝗁𝗍 announced. Todoroki wasted no time, sliding across with his ice. Too bad Katsuki managed to pass him by flying with his explosions. Izuku groaned once he reached the pitfall of death. He should have picked to use telekinesis instead of his fire. After a few minutes, Izuku finally made it to the final obstacle, 𝗪𝗪. As 𝗵𝗃𝗃𝗁𝗍 explained, they aren't dangerous. However, they are bright and have vibrations enough for students to lose balance. Just like Katsuki's explosions. Wait. An idea popped into the greenette's mind. He started digging up the ground and carefully placing a multitude of landmines inside. The students that had passed him gave him weird looks, but that didn't bother to him. After a few moments, he readied himself by holding up the green metal plate. Then he sprinted and jumped onto the landmines, creating a large explosion that shot him up and across the field. "Thanks for the idea, Kaken." He chuckled as he flew across the other contestants. "Whoa!" 𝗵𝗃𝗃𝗁𝗍 gasped. Midoriya Izuku had made a dangerous gamble. Well, Izuku is really good at gambling. He always wins at casinos. Izuku found himself approaching the ground. He won't win if he lands there. Despite not being interested in the sports festival, he still loves winning. A selfish reason he knows, but can you blame him? He's human after all. The only logical conclusion is to take another leap. Izuku stepped on Todoroki's left shoulder and Katsuki's right, slamming the metal plate onto the ground filled with landmines. Another large explosion flashed in everyone's eyes as Katsuki and Todoroki lost balance and toppled over. Izuku got flung once more, reaching the end of the landmine. He landed harshly, gaining a few bruises and scratches, but they healed as quick as they formed. Izuku dashed for the finish line, desperate to gain another mental trophy. And the winner of the obstacle course is Midoriya Izuku. Izuku ran out of the tunnel as soon as his name was mentioned. The crowd went wild, cheering his name enthusiastically. He pumped his fist into the air, sweating and breathing ever so slightly. "See that, mother? I did it!" he shouted at the top of his lungs. Mieto knew that the greenette wasn't referring to her. She knew that she could never replace his actual mother. However, she couldn't help but feel proud. Proud to be Izuku's adoptive mother. She smiled at the television screen that showcased her adoptive son's victory, her golden emerald eyes glimmering with pride. That's my boy. The second round will be. Midnight spun the wheel again. The tension in the arena rose as it spun continuously until it finally landed. A cavalry battle. Teamwork. With a little twist, suddenly, non-existent lights seemed to turn off. The only place that remained bright was Izuku's spot in the crowd. The person that got first place in the first round will have 10 million points. Izuku's eye twitched as the other contestants eyed him maliciously. He simply glared back threateningly as if saying, "Bring it on." This is bad. No one wants to team up with him because they're scared to be targeted. Izuku was starting to regret trying in the obstacle course. "Hey, Izuku." A sudden voice snapped him out of his internal panic. Spiky blonde hair was all he needed to see to identify the person who called him. "Hey, Kaken," Izuku replied, smiling softly at his childhood best friend. "What do you need?" "Be in my team," was all Katsuki responded with. The green-haired boy blinked in surprise. "Are you sure?" Izuku asked uncertainly. He did not want to be the downfall of his crush's team that would leave a bad impression on him. "Definitely. Now come on, nerd." Katsuki didn't waste any more time, grabbing Izuku by the wrist and dragging him to his team. "Dumb hair. Flex tape." Bakugo called, immediately getting the two's attention. "Hey, Midoriya bro." Kirishima exclaimed enthusiastically. Zero smiled at the green-haired male. "I guess you're our last teammate." I guess so," Izuku said, rubbing the back of his head. Katsuki stared at him with determined eyes, then shifted his gaze to the palm of his hand. Katsuki's POV: I don't know what's going on with the nerd, but he's ducking suspicious. The way his smile seems so fake, the way he nearly lashed out the other day. Something is up. And I want to know what. That means I have to improve our relationship. Maybe then would he tell me his secret? Working together in the cavalry battle is useful, since it gives us a better chance of winning and I can get what I want. Dumb hair is the front horse, considering he can charge into battle and no one could get a single scratch on him. Flex tape is a side horse. He's just an extra in case we need to trap people. Izuku is the other side horse. He has literal firepower and the sudden appearance of a strength enhancer. He would be a formidable foe if we were to fight, that much I know. Overall, we are an unstoppable force. Perfect. Kaken, Izuku called soothingly. I blinked and looked down at him while tying my headband. Why did you consider making me a part of your team? There's a weird thing I noticed about Izuku's tone of voice. Whenever he would get serious, his voice would suddenly lack its usual enthusiasm and sheepishness. It's like he becomes a whole other person. It's good to team up with people you get along with. I'm not stupid, Izu, I know the basics. I replied. He hummed in acknowledgement, preparing himself. The moment that salty teacher announces the start of the cavalry battle, everyone starts charging towards us. Good, I love the attention. Team Bakugo dodged the others' attacks skillfully, never faltering in their steps. They managed to get a headband with 20 points. Monoma's team almost got Katsuki's headband, but Izuku did not let that happen. He aggressively kicked Monoma's hand away, effectively knocking him back. To Izuku's bewilderment, Monoma grinned. Suddenly, flames ignited from his palms. The green-haired male cursed himself under his breath for forgetting the blonde's irritating quirk. "Oh, what a nice quirk you have here. Mind if I borrow it?" Monoma asked overbearingly. "Most definitely." Izuku gritted his teeth in a scowl, lunging towards the blonde. Unfortunately, his team managed to dodge his attack. "Don't let him get to you, Midoriya bro." Kirishima discouraged. Izuku took a deep breath to calm himself and nodded at the redhead's request. The teams fought for a while. Katsuki started getting annoyed since Monoma would not leave them alone. Until Monoma finally got a hold of the 10 million points. "DM it." Katsuki cursed. "Annoying pest. Watch your language." "We're on live television." Monoma grinned triumphantly at Katsuki's infuriated state. He tied the headband around his neck. "Looks like you're gonna lose." Katsuki lunged away from his team and towards Monoma, only to be blocked by an air barrier. "Nah," Monoma mocked. "Kaken." stay with the team. Izuku berated, running towards the blonde. Kirishima and Siro worriedly followed. Katsuki punched at the air barrier and managed to break through. His hand brushed on the headband, but slipped. Duck. The blonde looked down in defeat. The sight hurt Izuku's heart. So, despite the war in his head, he used telekinesis on the headband. It flew straight into Katsuki's palm, startling him. The blonde turned his head and looked at Izuku with wide eyes. Izuku shook his head. We'll talk about this later. In the end, Team Bakugo got first place, followed by Team Todoroki, Team Tokoyami and Team Shinso. Katsuki was going to approach Izuku about his discovery, but Todoroki beat him to it. Midoriya, I want to talk to you, Todoroki requested. Izuku blinked up at him with fake enthusiasm. Of course, Todoroki-kun. Izuku replied with a bright grin. However, he was secretly nervous. Had he discovered something like Katsuki did? What do you need, Todoroki-kun? Izuku asked curiously. He was leaning onto the side of the tunnel. Todoroki leaned on the opposite wall. Midoriya, are you really All Might's secret love child or something? Todoroki asked, absolute certainty in his voice. Izuku blinked in surprise, eyes widening. Luckily, he managed to stifle his laughter and gulp it down with a sheepish smile. Am I? Pardon. Izuku managed to clasp a hand over his mouth to stop himself from laughing. Even if you aren't, you have some sort of close relationship with All Might. Your connection with All Might gives me enough reason to beat you, Todoroki explained, glaring at the unfazed green-haired teen in front of him. So, you intend to declare a war? Izuku clasped his hands behind his back and pressed a leg on the wall he was leaning on. Earlier, you almost made me use my fire. I almost broke my oath. Todoroki glanced at his left hand and clenched it into a fist. Izuku listened with piqued interest, leaning slightly closer as if he could not hear what he was saying. Tell me, Midoriya, do you know what quirk marriages are? The green-haired in question blinked slowly, as if contemplating his answer. Yes, I have, he replied simply. Then, I don't need to explain it to you. I, Todoroki pointed to himself, am the result of a quirk marriage. After hearing that, Izuku scowled at the antics of the number 2 hero. Of course, he had already found out about Todoroki's past. But hearing it come out of his son's mouth with such hatred, the mafia leader sighed. He could not attack 𝗵𝗲, he was far too guarded. Attempting to kill that scornful man would be too risky and a waste of his time. I understand, Todoroki, Izuku asserted, a small smile gracing his lips. You are hurt. Izuku walked towards a mildly shocked Todoroki and placed a gentle palm on his cheek, caressing it. You despise your old man. I am familiar with that feeling. Izuku brought his hand back to his side. But do not let his presence hold you down. Huh? Todoroki raised an eyebrow curiously. 𝗵𝗲 is not worth your time. You can be saving people with your power. Do not waste it, Izuku concluded, walking away. Todoroki stared after the greenette, both confusion and admiration in his gaze. While Izuku was walking towards the preparation room for his class, he bumps into an unsuspecting accomplice. Sorry, Izuku attempted to ignore 𝗵𝗲 by walking past him, but the hero abruptly stopped him. You're that Midoriya boy, 𝗵𝗲 commented. Izuku grimaced and nodded, continuing in his steps. Just ignore him, he isn't worth your time. Your quirk is quite impressive. I saw you use it against my 𝗧𝗲𝗃 in the cavalry battle. This made Izuku stop. Why are you talking to me? He inclined his head to glare at 𝗵𝗲, his patience partially lost. Your quirk is similar to All Might's. So, technically, it is my 𝗧𝗲𝗃's mission to defeat you, 𝗵𝗲 replied confidently, completely ignoring Izuku's previous question. The green-haired boy's left eye twitched in annoyance as his brows furrowed in anger. I am not All Might, Izuku snarled, emerald eyes glinting with malice for the flaming trash displayed in front of him. That's obvious. That is obvious, correct? Izuku continued, smirking at 𝗵𝗲's infuriated expression. His smirk was soon replaced by a scowl. Todoroki-kun is not you either. 𝗵𝗲 blinked, as if trying to absorb the information he was given. Izuku took this chance to walk away, his blood boiling with rage. Izuku decided to scroll through his phone to avoid killing an innocent soul. Abruptly, he paused in his step and smiled, all his previous anger demolished. "𝗵𝗃𝗲, I'm proud of you, Izuku." If not for the years of emotional control training, Izuku would have broken down in tears just by reading the simple message. He liked to imagine that it was his biological mother who had texted him, but that would not be possible. Izuku shook his head to get away from his thoughts, sending a quick but heartwarming text back. "Izuku, thank you. I love you." The green-haired boy smiled once more, pocketing his phone and continuing his walk to the preparation room. Midoriya Izuku, the boy who has gotten top in every round so far. Versus. Present, Mike announced, pointing towards the other side of the arena. 𝗫𝗄𝗧𝗍. I actually don't know much about him yet. Izuku stared at 𝗫𝗄𝗧 with an unreadable expression, as if analyzing him. Earlier, the greenette had gotten a warning from 𝗳𝗧𝗟. The yellow-haired male claimed that 𝗫𝗄𝗧's quirk was brainwashing and would activate whenever someone would talk to him. Izuku took the information to mind, considering the endless possibilities that could occur in his battle. "Start." Midnight interrupted Izuku's train of thought before he could start muttering uncontrollably. Immediately, 𝗫𝗄𝗧 started to speak. "You know, you have such a strong quirk." Izuku ignored him, stepping forwards. He could see the mild panic in 𝗫𝗄𝗧's posture as he shifted slightly. "You're really lucky, you know. You're recognized and praised." It almost made Izuku chuckle at how desperate 𝗫𝗄𝗧 was getting. The purple-haired teen had tried to push him to speak by insulting him or his classmates. It did not really trigger Izuku, but it got him slightly agitated. The greenette was nearing 𝗫𝗄𝗧, but abruptly paused at a certain comment. Bakugo was it? He was so arrogant. I doubt he'd be a good hero. Izuku knew 𝗫𝗄𝗧 was just messing with him, trying to get him to respond. But he could not help the boiling rage that bubbled in his throat. No one talks about his Katsuki like that. 𝗫𝗄𝗧's eyes seemed to glimmer in hope at Izuku's reaction. His lips tugged at a confident smile. "In my opinion, judging by the way he acts, Bakugo would be better off as a villain. He doesn't deserve the title hero," that was it. Blinded by rage, Izuku sent a wave of fire towards 𝗫𝗄𝗧. Luckily for the general study student, he managed to barely dodge. "Kaken will become a hero. I do not care about anything else. Call me what you want, but if I catch you calling him a villain ever again," Izuku glared at his opponent, causing him to shrink against his gaze. "I will kill you." Then, Izuku's emerald eyes turned into a blank white. His tense shoulders relaxed and his glare softened. 𝗫𝗄𝗧 let out a shaky breath of relief. "Why you scare me, Midoriya-kun?" he shuddered. The purple-haired male shook his head to keep his focus on the battlefield and raised his finger to point ahead. "Now, walk out of bounds." Aizawa let out a breath he did not know he was holding. After Hizashi made a loud announcement, he turned to his bandaged friend. "You all right, Zawa?" Hizashi asked from beside him, voice shaky and uncertain. Small beads of sweat noticeably trickled down the blonde's forehead, despite the two heroes sitting in an air-conditioned room. "I'm fine," Aizawa responded, sighing in relief at 𝗫𝗄𝗧's safety. Imagine what would have happened if the purple-haired male's quirk had not activated. The ebony-haired man unintentionally shuddered at the thought. "Man, Midoriya's kind of scary," Hizashi sighed. Aizawa slowly nodded, watching as Midoriya slowly advanced towards the white line. Suddenly, a huge gust of wind blew past the audience, causing an uproar. The gust of wind was apparently created by Midoriya. Aizawa caught sight of Midoriya's broken fingers, eyes widening when he saw them instantaneously regenerate. Midoriya made a wise choice of shoving his hand into his pocket, hiding his quick recovery from the world. The underground hero made a mental note to question the greenette afterwards. The underground hero let out a contented sigh, watching as Izuku effortlessly chopped the back of 𝗫𝗄𝗧's neck, effectively knocking the lavender-haired teen out with a single hand. Aizawa was neither surprised nor impressed by the easily predicted action. Izuku was beyond perplexed. While he was under 𝗫𝗄𝗧's control, he saw 8 figures at the tunnel he was advancing towards. Hallucination. The strangest thing he noticed about his vision was that one of the 8 people he saw looked like 𝗳𝗏𝗄𝗎. Perhaps this vision had a connection to 𝗓𝗏𝗏. That was Izuku's best guess. He decided to schedule a meetup with 𝗳𝗏𝗄𝗎 and focus on the sports festival for the time being. Oi, nerd, Katsuki walked up to him and tapped his shoulder. That is surprisingly gentle. Something is wrong. Do you need something, Kaken? Izuku tilted his head to the side and smiled, faking a completely innocent facial expression. Don't ducking mess with me, Izuku, Katsuki growled angrily, glaring at his best friend. Izuku faltered slightly, contemplating the words. He gritted his teeth and clenched his fists. I can't tell you, not now, not ever. Katsuki crossed his arms and raised a brow. No, Izuku cut himself off, lowering his head solemnly. That was exactly what he intended to do. He never wanted to tell the blonde about his secret life, in fear of losing him. But if he did not tell him, he would still end up losing him. What an unfair game he was participating in. That's what I thought, Katsuki grumbled under his breath. When he turned his back on Izuku, the green-haired male acted out of instinct and clasped a trembling hand around Katsuki's wrist. Please don't leave, Kaken, Izuku choked out. He could not risk losing him again. His heart would not be able to handle the strain. I will tell you after the sports festival, I promise. Katsuki hesitated, but nodded. He would not admit it, but losing Izuku again would mean losing the world. His world. The greenette let out a sigh of relief, releasing his grip on the blonde's wrist. He managed a sheepish smile, his emerald irises glistening with hope. And now, the battle you've all been waiting for. The fight between 2 overpowered students. Present Mike shouted excitedly as Izuku and Todoroki walked out from their respective tunnels. Todoroki Shuto versus Midoriya Izuku. As the crowd cheered loudly, Izuku shook his head to clear his mind. He was still quite shaken from his conversation with Katsuki, but tried his best to focus on his match. Begin. Immediately, Todoroki sent a wave of ice at Izuku. The greenette held up his hand, instantly evaporating the ice with little effort. Trying to kill me, Todoroki-kun. Izuku tilted his head to the side and blinked innocently. He dodged another wave of ice that approached him and evaporated it as well. You're acting, Midoriya, Todoroki growled, slightly surprising his opponent. Show me who you really are. I despise fake people. Izuku stood there as the boy with heterochromia eyes scolded him, his voice laced with annoyance. Honestly, it was the most emotion Izuku had ever seen Todoroki express. The greenette chuckled lightly, evaporating another wave of ice that was thrown at him. It was starting to get annoying. I will see to your request if you defeat me, Izuku declared, backflipping away from a wave of ice and holding his hands up to evaporate it. A few moments passed, and both parties were starting to tire out, more Todoroki than Izuku, obviously. Use your fire, Todoroki-kun. Why should I listen to you? Almost Todoroki's entire right side was covered in frost and his mouth expelled cold breath. Look at me, Izuku stood still as Todoroki examined the boy with a bewildered expression. You haven't landed a single scratch on me. How do you expect to win like this? Todoroki rolled his eyes, teeth gritting together in an attempt to suppress the cold temperature on his right side. You're resistant to fire. Not if the flames are hot enough, Izuku shrugged. Todoroki raised a brow. Why was he telling his opponent his weakness? Why was he going so far just for him to use his fire? We're all doing our best, Todoroki. But here you are, using only half of your power. I won't use his quirk. Todoroki retorted. Don't you get it, idiot? Izuku growled, voice dangerously low. In an attempt to get the greenette to shut up, Todoroki stomped his foot onto the ground and dispelled spikes of ice towards him. Of course, his pitiful attempt had not worked. Izuku dodged to the side and evaporated the ice once again. It's your power, not his. There was a meek silence that surrounded the arena, with Izuku staring straight into Todoroki's heterochromia eyes that seemed to widen in realization. Suddenly, vibrant crimson flames ignited from Todoroki's left side, instantaneously combusting all the ice in the area. The arena filled with cheers of excitement as the audience registered the sight. "Shuto!" 𝗵𝗃𝗏 yelled out, startling a few people into glancing at him. "Finally, you've gotten rid of your childish disobedience." "Shut up, 𝗵𝗃𝗏!" Izuku yelled at the man in frustration. He had built up so much anger, and just had to take it out on something. His bold comments surprised the spectators. Some even had to hide their laughter and grins, 𝗳𝗍𝗄𝗏, as to not get in trouble with 𝗵𝗃𝗏. "What did you?" Before 𝗵𝗃𝗏 could rage on, Present Mic had the decency to cover for Izuku. 𝗳𝗿𝗧𝗟𝗘 finally uses his flames. Present Mic chuckled in amazement. Aizawa rolled his eyes at his friend's antics. Izuku could not help the toothy grin that graced his lips as he stared at the flames, proud of his accomplishment. "You're interesting, Midoriya," 𝗳𝗏𝗧𝗪𝗏 commented, grinning slightly in amusement. Izuku readied himself in a battle stance, instinctively activating One for All. Power, along with agony, surged through every inch of his body, and he felt himself shiver slightly. His sleeves tore and shredded into pieces, along with his entire top. 𝗳𝗏𝗧𝗪𝗏 sighed, powering up both his fire and ice. Having little to no control over his flames, they combusted the left side of his shirt to ashes. The silent tears that trickled down his cheeks immediately evaporated from the immense heat. As Izuku and 𝗳𝗏𝗧𝗪𝗏 blasted toward one another, multiple cement walls rose from the ground in a poor attempt to minimize the damage. Then everything turned dark,